If her teammate couldn't cast Hand of Protection in time, Daikas would certainly have been shattered by that horrifying strike. When Daikas was sent flying, a streak of light of life fell on her head. Elder Sewell healed Daikas' injuries almost immediately. Charge! Warriors yelled and pushed up again. Watch out for its teleport! Dwarf Raph shouted. As a main tank, the biggest insult was letting a boss slip into the back line of the group. Is this tactic useless on this guy? The Dwarf King obviously understood these people's tactics. The dwarves were planning to restrain Neth's movements while the people in the back could cast spells without interruption. But this tactic could only be used in a perfect situation. After all, how could a powerful existence that could tear open space and leave through the void be restrained by a few clumsy warriors? Stupid! Sword Saint Claus said with a snort. Does he think that his opponent is a moron? How could they continue this strategy after witnessing their enemy's ability to tear open space? It would be fine if they didn't know, but now it seems like they are at their wits' end. At this moment, one saint-level mage who had retreated with the Radiant Light Godly Nation said, "It is a shame that I thought they were very powerful." Even the Elf Queen frowned, wondering how they could block a peak saint-level master with ease. At this moment, Dwarf Raph removed the defense formation and smashed his heavy shield toward his opponent's head with a vicious force. Shield Slam. Revenge. Sunder Armor. Strikes crashed down at Master of Energy Neth one after another. Clank. An axe hacked down. Dodge. Don't you dare to take one axe strike from your granddaddy. Hiding in your turtle shell? Do you still call yourself a hero? Fight back! Come on! Fight back! A saint-level master doesn't dare to fight a mere level 9 warrior head-on. Boom! 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 In the whistling sounds created by the huge swinging hammer, everyone saw this dwarf suddenly change into another combat style, calling out and mocking the enemy without holding back. Clank! A huge energy ball crashed down, and Dwarf Raph casually blocked it by raising his shield. Then, he stuck out half of his face from behind his huge shield and said, "Hey! Do it again!" Boom! Another huge lightning ball crashed down. DPS! Full DPS! First Elder Hyru shouted. The audience at the nation's summit looked at each other in stupefaction. Some elves wiped the sweat off their foreheads and looked at the horrifyingly gloomy face of Master of Energy Neth. Taunt is not effective on old god Sethun, but it seems to be effective on this one. Hey! Come on! DPS! Even some melee elves charged at Neth. Sword lights and magic spell lights crashed onto Neth like raindrops in a violent storm. Even a powerful existence like Neth couldn't block the forceful attacks from the level 8 and level masters with its physical body, let alone that these attacks were forceful. On the battleground, the Alliance army was still fighting under the command of Mr. Fang. Meanwhile, the elite team also seemed to be obtaining the upper hand in the saint-slaying battle. The warriors seemed to have formed a defense line like an iron wall. However, something unexpected happened at this moment. A horrifying crack suddenly opened across the whole sky. Pitch-black lightning bolts poured down like a storm, instantly swallowing the front-line warriors and knights. Then, countless black python-like lightning bolts struck the mages and healers in the back line. This strike caught everyone by surprise. Screams and groans were overpowered by the thunder and pitch-black lightning bolts. Except for a few mages who got away with blink and some lucky ranged paladins who had cast invulnerability, the others all fell from the sky like blocks of charcoal. Almost instantly, the joy for the imminent victory on the faces of the warriors and mages from different races turned into horror. Looking at their expressions, Neth looked very satisfied. With mocking anger on its chilly face, it sneered and said, "Do you think you can affect me with these small tricks? Don't underestimate me." The elite team that had consisted of dozens of people only had about 10 of them remain standing. Everyone's mind turned blank. Wars were not games. We encountered this clumsy trick 1,000 years ago when we conquered another plane. While Neth spoke, it moved silently behind one figure as if it had teleported and stabbed its palm that was as sharp as a sword toward this figure's chest. Sala! Pucci! Blood sprayed all over the area. What? Sala turned around in a daze, and she saw a figure standing before her. Seeing other people looking at him in surprise, Lance looked down at his chest. Blood flowed down his chest. Captain! Sala, Rowling, and other teammates who had the lowest cultivation strengths in the team screamed in horror. In the game, they could pull the dead teammates up and redo the instance again. But in the real world? The horrifying demon before them would never give them a chance to save their teammate. The sedate elf captain smiled with difficulty and comforted them. In a raid, death is inevitable. Even if we're wiped out, we already obtained the hard-earned information. We have the second and third groups to continue the raid. Even if they are all wiped out, we still have the Orc Kingdom Guild, Mercenary Guild, and Mage Guild. We'll prevail. You're dead. With a distorted expression, Neth broke his head viciously and dumped Lance's body from the sky like a broken sack. For victory and glory. Taking use of the invulnerability time, Captain Elvin led some paladins and charged at Neth like crazy. Second group of Silver Moon Forest. First Elder Hyru of the elf clan lifted his staff, and a large group of elves instantly charged forward. 10 minutes later, many elves fell from the sky. Second group of Blackstone Castle. While a furious roar sounded, another team charged forward. These people were fearless and charged forward one after another with the sole purpose of victory. For victory and glory. Charge. Shield wall. Invulnerability. Block its attacks with invulnerability. At this moment, even Neth, the Master of Energy, who was a pinnacle stage saint-level master, looked afraid while its strong body was covered in ugly wounds. Neth looked furious that it was forced into a corner by a group of ants. Destructive thunder. Have a taste of death. Black lightning bolts rose in the sky without warning. But this time, Neth felt a chilly sensation coming at its back. Gouch. Harrison appeared behind Neth from thin air. Die. Alina suddenly appeared before Neth and kicked it while it was trying to dodge Gouch. Roar. With a shrill scream, Neth was instantly swallowed by lights created by spells. At this moment, Death Lord Draz had cold godly lights flashing in its eyes. Do it! The mage beside it immediately waved its staff, releasing a pitch-black spiritual light shield which gradually engulfed Neth. But just before the light shield closed, Neth heard a horrifying and whistling sound. Swoosh! The staff was instantly pierced by a pitch-black arrow. Then, like a lightning flash, a figure shot into the energy light shield that was about to close. Boom! Boom! Several explosions sounded, and the entire black shield exploded, shattering half of Neth's upper body. Sylvanas lifted her long bow and let out a hoarse roar, for the Horde! For the Horde! For Queen Sylvanas! In the endless, ocean-like roars, many orcs, elves, and humans of the Horde charged forward. Finally, the horrifying enemy fell from the sky listlessly. The Alliance players exchanged a look and shrugged while shouting, "For the Alliance!" All these people gathered together, and it seemed like no one could stop their charge toward victory. Even the powerful Shadow Legion had to run in defeat, and Master of Energy Neth had to die. At this moment, everyone including the audience at the Nations Summit realized that this was an unrivaled army. Other than the strongest commanders, the Shadow Legion had many masters. However, they saw that on the other battleground, the army commanded by that young man not only defeated the Shadow Legion but killed many powerful existences who had been enslaved by the Shadow Legion or had joined the Shadow Legion due to fear. Many questions lingered in the minds of people at the Nations Summit, wondering how this randomly mixed army from different races could defeat the Shadow Legion with only small casualties on their side. Besides, where did this Elf Queen come from? Elf Queen Kelebel stared at the spiritual spell visual projection dumbfoundedly. How come this one is also a queen? When the war ends, I have to summon the elders and ask them about it." She was furious that her elves had found another queen. "Your Majesty Kelebel," Saint Dolan said with a faint smile, "it seems like some political conflicts are about to happen in your clan. This is the internal business of our elf clan, and it has nothing to do with you." Elf Queen Kelebel said coldly, "Besides, our elf clan are not like you guys who would use dirty tricks to control people's minds." Saint Dolan's face instantly turned dark. Indeed, the elves were proud of their freedom and peace, and they were wild and sincere, not willing to betray others. In fact, the elf queen was not their absolute ruler, but rather acted as a guide and leader. On the battleground, only a handful of top-level masters of the Shadow Legion remained standing. Fighting fiercely, they defended the Death Lord. Die! Nation-protecting sword Saint Wilson of the Morning Light Empire slashed out his thin sword, which condensed into many sharp sword energies, piercing the chest of the saint-level master of the Shadow Legion in front of him as if he was piercing a piece of thin paper. Meanwhile, Leiden hacked down with his huge sword and chopped several pinnacle stage level 9 masters into 2 halves. "We're winning," he roared hoarsely. He saw the dawn of victory. "People of Lianshan Principality, follow me and attack! Attack!" The old orc king raised his huge sword high and instantly sent 2 saint-level masters before him flying. "For the people of our kingdom who died tragically! For victory and glory!" Roar! Seeing this scene, the viewers at the nation's summit were stunned. Even Saint Dolan, with clenched fists and a livid face, had to admit that this was absolutely the holiest and epic moment in the history of Nora continent. Led by only a late-stage saint-level master, the fearless level 8 and level 9 warriors and mages charged tirelessly again and defeated Master of Energy Neth, one of the main commanders of the Shadow Legion who had destroyed many planes. Even the Death Lord couldn't save Neth. At this moment, the Alliance army surrounded the last remaining masters of the Shadow Legion, ready for the last battle. "All the warriors, rush up!" Mr. Fang shouted, "Don't be afraid. Victory belongs to us." At this moment, the Death Lord and the mage beside him, Master of Sorrow Mark, exchanged a look. "Hey!" Suddenly, Mr. Fang felt like he was weightless as he was lifted into mid-air. Then, a mass of pitch-black thick fog engulfed him. Master of Sorrow Mark, the mage standing beside the Death Lord, shouted, "Do you see this? If you want him alive, stay here. I know you can resurrect people, but if I take out his soul and sacrifice it to our god, do you think you can still resurrect him?" Full retreat. Under the incredulous gazes from the nation's summit, the shadow demon dragon flapped its wings and flew toward the distant mountains in the north with all the remaining members of the Shadow Legion. They actually retreated. But at the second thought, it wasn't so surprising. After all, Mr. Fang's force wasn't the only force in this world. Even if these remaining masters of the Shadow Legion managed to defeat the Alliance army with heavy casualties, they would still be doomed since they wouldn't be able to get out of this world anymore. Ah! The shop owner got kidnapped. Seeing the shadow demon dragon flying toward the distance, the elves, dwarves, and orcs instantly started to shout. At the nation's summit, Princess Isabella sighed lightly and said, "He's a good commander. Unfortunately, his strength is too weak. He's lower than level 8. World Mage Hematon said, "He won't survive at the Death Lord's hands." Princess Isabella sighed and said, "You'll always be remembered for your sacrifice for the humans of the Nora continent." If the Shadow Legion captured someone else, not everyone would be worried. However, they kidnapped Mr. Fang. This was outrageous to these people. When these people were about to chase, a pitch-black shadow suddenly appeared in the sky before them. In the blink of an eye, it got close to them, and they saw that it was a black flame sword energy which ran from the distant horizon across the sky, spanning above several small human nations. Seeing the huge destructive black moon-like sword energy, some people were worried that this sword strike might even turn them and the Lianshan Principality behind them into ashes. Shouts and roars of fury erupted in the crowds. All the saint-level masters including First Elder Hyru of the Elf clan had to unleash their full force. Presence of mind. Sword Essence Strike. Meteor Storm. These people used their most powerful spells and combat techniques regardless if they had learned them by themselves or from the games. The huge black sword energy looked like a horrifying tsunami while countless light beams, big or small, dim or bright, shot into it, creating up small waves. Meanwhile, about 10 saint-level masters of the Alliance army also poured their attacks into the sword essence like crazy. The huge sword energy was gradually weakened until only a puff of black mist was left. During the process, the huge impact force left by the sword energy had knocked down many Alliance soldiers. When the people settled down, the shadow demon dragon had disappeared at the horizon in the northern sky. So powerful! At the nation's summit, even Sword Saint Claus paled at the scene. Even World Mage Hematon, who had always been proud and even arrogant, gasped involuntarily. Is this the Death Lord's true strength? It was hard to imagine the strength that could hold off the entire Alliance army with one sword slash. On the other side, Princess Isabella, who was called the Light of the Godly Nation and was rumored to have a strength greater than the Supreme King of Radiant Light Godly Nation, walked out of her palace. The chilly, knife-like, icy wind on the lofty mountain blew at her pale golden hem of her dress while her eyes that were as cold as snow looked into the distant north from the peak of the snow mountain. Hurry! Follow them! At the nation's summit, the masters of different races, including the ones from the Judgment Godly Palace, still watched the situation on the battleground through the spiritual spell visual projection. Impatiently, they ordered the mages who were responsible for the spiritual spell visual projection to move the visuals and follow the scene. In this world, there were many spiritual spells that could monitor distant places and create projected visuals. The one used at the nation's summit was the most advanced surveillance spell, Eye of Supervision. A streak of invisible spiritual energy gathered in the sky like an invisible eye. Don't get too close, Saint Dolan immediately warned. For a moment, some of these masters had thought of joining the rescue mission. But considering the fact that they were still in the distant Silver Moon Forest and Dwarf Kingdom and couldn't get there in time, they settled down and continued to watch at the nation's summit. While the winding mountains, rivers, and forest quickly passed below him, Mr. Fang suddenly received a message from the system. Right now, he was reading the message on the system interface. Beep. Holy Light Miracle is completed. Mr. Fang glanced at the task list. New task, Holy Light Miracle Task Description, lead the players in the new shop to a glorious victory with Holy Light. Task Assistance Items, the Symbol of Life *0/5, Carrier Rock 0/2, used, Task Reward, Carrier Rock *1. Do you want to claim the task reward now? VES, the previous 2 Carrier Rocks were items for the task, but this one was for himself. This was another powerful trump card. After receiving the new task reward, Mr. Fang saw 2 other prompts. One was about the release time of the expansion of War of Warcraft, The Burning Crusade, and the other was about a new game. Mr. Fang was about to read the messages when the sky around him suddenly lit up. A huge black vortex hovered in the sky above the endless snow mountains, and it sucked in countless winds and snowflakes like a fathomless black hole. We should leave now. The black-cloaked, tall and thin mage Mark, the Master of Sorrow, looked at the sky and seemed to notice that people were watching them. However, it seemed like this mage didn't pay much attention to it. How do we deal with this man? The young man who looked to be in his 20s was looking around at the surroundings. Should we sacrifice him? Master of Sorrow Mark sounded gloomy and cold as if it was the death god issuing a sentence. Our god will find this guy interesting. Finished. Elf Queen Kellybull's beautiful face looked sad that the commander who had led the Alliance army to a great and glorious victory would die in this place in such a way. Oh! This is really a hero's eulogy, the Dwarf King said with a heavy sigh. However, a trace of undetectable pleasure flashed across Saint Dolan's face. Look. This is the price. Maybe only Princess Her Highness can save him, but it's too late now, World Mage Hematon said. Right now, these people already saw that the figure sitting tall on the shadow demon dragon hacking down his demonic sword that was engulfed in blazing black flames. After witnessing the horrifying power of the previous sword slash, these people could sense the horrifying strength contained in the sword even through the spiritual spell visual projection. This sword would probably shatter Fang Qi and also destroy the mountain that Fang Qi was standing on. In the Dwarf Kingdom, the king slammed his fist on the stone table before him and shattered it. At this moment, even the masters, who had retreated from the battleground but still possessed some sense of honor, clenched their fists unconsciously. However, Saint Dolan's lips curved up slightly. Boom! With an earth-shaking noise, horrifying air waves swept away the surrounding snow like a storm. It seemed like a nuclear bomb exploded on the snow mountain. Next, everyone saw something unbelievable. The ground that Fang Qi stood on was intact. An arm sheathed in a black gauntlet had caught the black demonic sword. Below the huge blade was a figure who had silverish white hair and was wearing a red windbreaker. "You kidnapped me and even want to kill me," a voice sounded casually. "That's not nice." This voice and tone. Saint Dolan, Sword Saint Claus, and World Mage Hematon exchanged a look when they heard the voice and tone that they would remember until the end of their lives. Is this the most powerful hidden boss from the continent of Immortal Relic? This. Even the arrogant World Mage Hematon was so astonished that he was at a loss for words. Elf Queen Kelebel covered her wide-open mouth with her snow-white and slender hand, her chin almost hit the ground. At this moment, Dwarf King Saladin's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "What's this?" As the second in command of the Judgment Godly Palace, Saint Dolan asked in a chilly voice. If players in the continent of Immortal Relic were here, they would recognize that this figure was the demon Ifid Dante from Devil May Cry. At this moment, everyone who was staring at the spiritual spell visual projection at the nation's summit saw a black figure appearing behind Fang Qi. One edge of the black cloak flew up in the howling gusts, revealing the demonic and distorted face of the Master of Sorrow mark under the hood. A black sickle that contained endless hatred and furious roars of dead spirits slashed at Fang Qi neck silently. Containing an extremely inauspicious presence, this blade seemed to be able to harvest people's souls. Without question, anyone who was struck by this blade wouldn't be able to enter the next life cycle. Ding! However, in the next instant, a crisp noise sounded. It seemed like two pieces of metal collided. Fang Qi, other hand sheathed in another gauntlet, blocked the attack steadily. It looked as if this strike was an attack from an average person. The second strike came less than 1 second after the first one, and everything happened in a flash. On the vast snow mountain, the Death Lord and the Master of Sorrow, two ultimate masters, fought against one opponent but couldn't put a scratch on the latter. Did you see it clearly? World Mage Hematon tightly gripped his staff. A special energy formed a huge energy impulse on the surface of his body when the strikes touched him. The attacks were countered, and the energy got absorbed. Princess Isabella stared at the spiritual spell visual projection intently while she explained, this all happened in the instant when the attacks made contact with his body. Sword Saint Claus swallowed his saliva with difficulty while a drop of cold sweat slid to the ground. Is this something that a human can achieve? The Death Lord and the Master of Sorrow's faces instantly turned stiff and cold. These two retreated, and the remaining saint-level masters of the Shadow Legion charged at Fang Qi, trying to overwhelm him with powerful attacks and not giving him the chance to breathe. Figures transformed into pitch-black shadows one by one while their weapons struck down like black lightning bolts. Then, the viewers at the nation's summit saw this figure before them flashing strangely like a ghost. All the attacks narrowly missed him. Sword Saint Claus rubbed his eyes subconsciously, afraid that he saw it wrong. How could it be? What the heck just happened? Did they miss the target? Sword Saint Claus said while different expressions flashed on his face. Using extremely high speed, he shifted his body and dodged all the attacks at the last moment before they touched his body. Princess Isabella tightened her grip on the armrests of her throne, and she didn't notice that she had shattered the exquisite crystal-like armrests into dust. Before the first wave of attacks finished, another wave of attacks appeared. The few remaining mages gathered tremendous magic energy before them, and it looked to be able to destroy anything and shot toward Fang Qi like a cannonball. "Let's see how you dodge that." Suddenly, they saw a blinding white light beam shooting out from the destructive magic light. It let out an ear-grating metal sound. Death Lord Draz only had time to hold its huge sword before its body to block. Boom! The audience stared at the spiritual spell visual projection without blinking. They weren't sure when, but the powerful mages and warriors of the Shadow Legion all lost half of their bodies before instantly dropping to the ground. Even the powerful Draz was instantly sent flying. Deadly silence permeated the space. It was silent both in the place where Fang Qi stood and at the nation's summit. How could such a person exist in the world? Even though only a few elites are left in the Shadow Legion, he had handled all of them by himself? Is he really a human? At this moment, only Fang Qi's voice could be heard. "You want to kill your hostage after the failed kidnap attempt?" Hearing his voice, Saint Dulan, World Mage Hematon, and Sword Saint Klaus exchange a look of alarm. They had a faint feeling that they had heard of this voice and tone somewhere before. While they were thinking, the last few beginning stage Saint-level warriors charged at Fang Qi. The battle was not over yet. A huge dark purple sword suddenly appeared in Fang Qi's hands. The sword was heavy, and it had a weird vertical eye on the ridge of the sword. At this moment, everyone was astonished to find that he seemed to cast out another figure. The moment that these enemies were about 10 meters from Fang Qi Tombstone Triangle. TL note: Tombstone Triangle is a high-level skill of the Soul Bender in Dungeon Fighter Online. 3 ancient dark purple tombstones with inscriptions on them suddenly fell from the sky, and a strange dark purple array spread around the warrior's feet. A chilly and desolate sensation from the ancient times engulfed them. Boom! 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 The purple shadow energy instantly swallowed everything it touched. Hum! In the thick dust, the audience saw Fang Qi suddenly making a move of drawing his saber. With a deep sword cry, a sword beam swept across the whole space with a whistling sound. The distant mountain peak was instantly chopped off, and a flat ground appeared. Thud! Thud! A series of noises resonated in the area, and it sounded like many things dropped to the ground. Everyone except the Death Lord and the Master of Sorrow dropped onto the battleground when Fang Qi returned to his previous state. Only a mere 10 seconds had passed since the battle began. At the nation's summit, Saint Dulan and others had a strange horrifying expression flashing across their faces while they watched the young man, who appeared to be lower than level 8, on the spiritual spell visual projection. Is he from the East Continent? The East Continent has such a master. At the nation's summit, a saint-level master gasped. Meanwhile, the people who had watched the battle at the continent of Immortal Relic in St. Heinz's Palace suddenly shivered. The East Continent? Is it him? The synchronization time has reached the limit. Mr. Fang looked at his synchronization time and then at the Death Lord and the Master of Sorrow while deeply inhaling. He had never synchronized with several characters repeatedly before. Has he reached the limit? With chilliness in his eyes, Saint Dulan thought that he had seen through this young man's tricks. If things were as he had expected, then this young man's abilities were not too high. Meanwhile, the Death Lord and the Master of Sorrow also seemed to see it. What a pity, the Death Lord said in a cold voice as he walked out from the shambles created by the distant collapsed mountain. No wonder you didn't attack during the whole war. You were just bluffing. The Master of Sorrow's face became even more twisted. You are just an ant. You even made me afraid a moment ago. Do you know what crime you've committed? When I catch you, I'll slowly burn your soul in the flames of pain for 1,000, no, 10,000 years. You'll forever feel the pain of your burning soul. Mr. Fang inhaled deeply and lit a cigarette. On the system interface, it showed the godly weapon fragment Kusanagi sword. Synchronization character, awakens. In its eyes, even these saint-level masters were just pawns that it could use however it wanted. It didn't spare much attention to Fang Qi either. Since this kid wants to resist, then I will show him what real power looked like. Do you know? Almost no creatures in this world can reach the level of gods, but I'm infinitely close to a god, it cackled coldly while it looked at the remaining saint-level masters of the Shadow Legion. Then, it lifted one of its withered hands from its wide mage's robe, summoning the remaining strength and life energy from these masters of the Shadow Legion, alive or dead. The strength and energy floated from their bodies and gathered in its palm like streaks of black smoke. The presence of the Master of Sorrow gradually grew and seemed to level up again. After that, it looked at the young man before it with satisfaction and arrogance. However, it suddenly found that the young man who it thought had reached his limit slowly rose into mid-air. It seemed like the omnipresent gravity of the world had no effect on him. Still, this wasn't the most astonishing part to the Master of Sorrow. After all, some powerful saint-level masters could do that as well. But the next scene riveted its eyes. A bright blue light beam shot up into the sky with the force erupting from Fang Qi body like a volcano. At this moment, it looked as if another soul had woken up in Fang Qi body. The golden snake pupils, the gaze that ignored everything in the world, and the horrifying and suffocating pressure. It seemed like Fang Qi was between time and space and would fade into a deeper dimension at any moment. He emitted a sun-like presence. There was no light around him, but people felt that the two suns in the sky all dimmed before him in this instant. Having just absorbed the energy and hovering in the air with a staff, the Master of Sorrow instantly froze on spot. This. At the nation's summit, Elf Queen Kelebel couldn't close her mouth through the process. The others also didn't dare to blink their eyes, afraid that they might miss a tiny detail. Isn't this person lower than level 8? How could he look like this? Who the heck is he? Saint Dolan tightened his grip on his staff and stared at the unthinkable existence in the screen who had white hair, golden eyes, and horrifying presence. What the heck are you? The Master of Sorrow had been through many battles and lived for many years, and it felt that all kinds of emotions that ordinary creatures would have already vanished from its body, making it closer to becoming a legendary god. Even after watching the destruction of several worlds, Mark didn't feel any emotional disturbance. However, at this moment, it felt more emotional disturbances than those combined in the past countless years. Have a taste of destruction. Master of Sorrow Mark waved its staff, and the space before it slowly shattered and revealed a chilly black space which was filled with horrifying storms, frightening thunder, and lightning flashes. As its spell continued, a huge vortex suddenly appeared in the shattered space. The storm, thunder, and lightning flashes in the void were gathered and compressed in the vortex until they were condensed into a black ball full of horrifying void storms in the center of the vortex. Finally, it was condensed into a crack that only one person could pass. Void thunderstorm. A grayish-blue light flashed with a sharp ear-grating noise. Like a huge cannon, it shot out a streak of destructive fire. The horrifying energy contained in the black light tore open the space again and left pitch-black cracks in it. Void energy. It's void energy. World Mage Hematon exclaimed, I'm astonished that they have begun to master the void energy. Regardless of how powerful this kid is, he can't block it, right? Sword Saint Claus said in a cold voice. Then, he froze. What's he doing? He discovered that Fang Qi stood where he was without any intention to dodge. Then, they saw a blue light flashing before Fang Qi. The black light beam suddenly turned and reversed. Boom! When the dust settled, the Master of Sorrow hovering in the air only had half of its body while the other half fell to the ground. Tick! Shocked, Sword Saint Claus had sweat all over his forehead while a drop of cold sweat fell to the ground. Dead! All the viewers looked as if they couldn't believe their eyes. The wings of the Shadow Demon Dragon shook. Druz, the leader and the last master of the Shadow Legion, looked as cold as ice. After lifting the demonic sword with blazing black flames, it struck down with force. Like a lightning flash, Fang Qi sidestepped and narrowly dodged it. Almost everyone thought that he was safe. But suddenly, a chilly presence shot toward him from behind. The strike was so sudden that it was impossible to dodge. Cackle, a gloomy voice sounded beside Fang Qi as a pitch-black figure condensed in the direction that Fang Qi was moving to. It was Master of Sorrow Mark. Its withered claws reached for Fang Qi back, emitting a chilly presence that could even freeze souls. "Thank you for giving me your soul." Watching the horrifying sight at the nation's summit, the lower stage saint-level masters felt chills running down their spines. It had been an illusion. In the countless years of its life, Master of Sorrow Mark had turned itself into a creature that was between reality and fantasy. The most powerful ability that it possessed was that it couldn't be harmed by any regular attacks. Ah! Seeing this, even Elf Queen Kelebel gasped in surprise. If she encountered this monster and was caught by this surprise attack, she probably would be hit and have had her soul drawn out. But at this moment, they saw in the spiritual spell visual projection that Mark's withered claws grabbed onto thin air, the white-haired young man had vanished. In the next moment, they saw the white-haired young man suddenly appearing behind Mark. He shoved his hand into its chest with a vicious force. Such a short life, the dark desperation move soul destruction. Orakai, who was synchronized with Fang Qi, lightly lifted his hand. A pitch-black energy storm pierced through the void, and the huge magnetic field even turned the wind, snow, and rocks around it into dust. Two forces met each other and created huge booming noises. Then, with a thunderous explosion, the whole mountain where the two forces met was razed to the ground. At this moment, the pitch-black demonic sword in Death Lord Driz's hands burned up with blazing black flames. Then, the air in the area began to burn. Crack! A huge thunderbolt crashed down from the sky. The sky and the land dimmed. Then, the whole world darkened as if it was swallowed by something. There was no sunlight, only darkness and chaos. In the chaos, Death Lord Driz lifted the black flame demonic sword and emitted a presence much more powerful than before. Godly power! This must be godly power! Even Saint Dullin lost his composure. He had been previously surprised by the things that he had never seen and imagined before. But now, he had a totally different opinion about this war. What did the appearance of godly power mean? It meant that the god whom the Shadow Legion believed in wasn't an imaginary being created to unite people's thoughts and stabilize the army. It meant that the god indeed existed. Long ago, people had begun to doubt the existence of the god of battle and technique whom some aristocrats of the Morning Light Empire worshipped. The elf clan's royal members hadn't seen godly miracles for a long time as well, and only the god whom the Judgment Godly Palace believed in had given them greater power and even showed some godly miracles. That was the truly great godly power. Without godly power, even the more powerful supermaster who could defeat Saint Dullin or Saint Heinz would be rendered powerless if the latter unleashed godly miracles. Humans couldn't break through the limit of the saint level. Therefore, those existences were supreme from the perspective of humans. The godly power was impossible for humans to block regardless of how hard they tried all their lives. Life is so lowly and tiny, the sky and the land seemed to shake at each syllable that Death Lord Driz uttered. It lifted its huge sword high in the air and said, "I sentence you to death in the name of the Shadow of Void, Hades Eurysith." The whole sky seemed to turn into a horrifying pitch-black vortex. In the vortex, a tremendous mass of energy fell from the dark sky. The absolute pressure from the upper existence made countless creatures in thousands of miles kneel. Even the Elf Queen in the distant Silver Moon Forest and the Dwarf King in the remote Dwarf Kingdom could feel this horrifying power. For Princess Isabella, only a handful of people in this world could battle her without using godly power. There were only a few of them. "I thought that I would have another good rival after this war," she sighed heavily, "what a pity." In the crystal-like magnificent palace on the grandest mountain peak of the radiant light godly nation, Princess Isabella gradually closed her eyes. "It's over," At this moment, elves, dwarves, and even humans from different nations had the feeling that perhaps in this world, there was a type of darkness that even light couldn't dispel. But at this moment, they saw Orakai, who was synchronized with Fang Qi, raise his arms as if he was embracing the morning sunday now, return to nothing. In the next moment, everyone saw that the endless darkness was pierced from the top as a beam of sunshine shined into it. Then, the second beam, the third, the fourth. Like a sieve, the pitch-black sky was pierced by countless blinding white light beams. Orakai Divine Light. At the nation's summit, everyone stared at the spiritual spell visual projection without blinking. Even Princess Isabella opened her eyes abruptly in disbelief. Hiss, hiss. The spiritual spell visual projection at the nation's summit turned fuzzy as if it was facing interference from a huge amount of energy. How come it's fuzzy? Everyone stared at the spiritual spell visual projection, frustrated that it would break down at such a moment. Dwarf King Saladin yelled, "Where is the mage group? Let me do it." While others had only their projected figures here, World Mage Hematon was at the nation's summit in person. From his staff, a bright blue magic current shot out and entered the crystal disc that was supporting the spiritual spell visual projection. At this moment, the whole space was turned blinding white. In the next moment, boom! The crystal disc in the middle of the conference hall of the nation's summit exploded, and the screen instantly vanished. Seeing this, everyone felt like screaming. It broke down at this critical moment. Frantically, they glared at World Mage Hematon with murderous spirit in their eyes. Hematon froze and explained, "No. It wasn't me, not me." Everything seemed to end in this pure white blinding light. However, a will was not vanquished in the light. When I was born, light scattered, the land collapsed, and space shattered. Countless ultimate existences fell one by one. Sensing the deepest fear, I embarked on the journey of searching and destruction. I followed the footprints of the great existences in my search and destroyed every creature related to them. I have been searching for the power that can make me into a god. The huge dark vortex gradually dimmed, and a figure seemed to have leaped into it. I will come back. The dark vortex instantly vanished. The bright blue sky and white snow mountains returned to the previous state. Except for some collapsed mountain peaks, no one would know that there had been a ground-shaking battle in this place. Some time later, a large group of elves, dwarves and human alliance soldiers hurried to this place. They saw the pale-faced Mr. Fang was stomping on the mountain top while yelling, "Bad deal. A giant loss." After glancing at the system interface, Fang Qi found that the synchronization time that he saved up so far were all used, and only one godly weapon fragment was left. "Hey? Sir, how come you're here by yourself?" Elf girl Sala hurried over and asked. Elder Sewell walked up and looked him up and down. Seeing that the shop owner was intact and didn't require any healing spells, she asked, "Sir, where are they?" "They were too trash, so I sent them back where they came from with one move," Mr. Fang answered casually. "Don't boast, and we'll still be friends." The elves in the front of the group were instantly displeased. While pouting, they almost drew their swords. "We've been so worried about you, and you're in the mood to joke around." Mr. Fang thought for a long while and said, "They dumped me here and left, that's more like it." Sala said, "Ugh. It still didn't feel right for some people. Let's go." Mr. Fang stood up. "The Burning Crusade is on a countdown." "So soon? We have to rebuild after the war," Mr. Dirk said immediately. "It isn't too soon. It won't be released for a while." "Ahia! Nice." Elf girl Sala was thrilled. "Then, we'll fight the Burning Crusade." Instantly, she felt the heavy burden of responsibility on her shoulders. "Wow! How come we're so powerful?" She was delighted with this thought. Except for the last trace of red light of the setting sun in the horizon, everything was in endless darkness. It was silent, and only a few crows flew in the sky. A few paladins stepped onto this desolate and dejected battleground. The dead warriors from the Elf clan, Dwarf clan, and Orc kingdom slowly woke up on the desolate battleground under the shining holy light. They looked around and shivered involuntarily. Cautiously, Helen turned over the corpse of a soldier of the Shadow Legion and saw that it looked totally different from a human, an elf, or a dwarf. Some of these corpses were from races that had been extinct long ago as recorded in the ancient documents. People wondered what kind of power could gather them into such a strong and fierce army. Did you notice that? Commander Elvin looked grim. All of them died in battle. None of them died while fleeing. It seemed like these creatures had no fear toward death. Everyone shivered subconsciously. If it was true. Without resurrection spells, no one dared to face such an army, let alone defeat them. They felt fortunate that this nightmarish legion was finally eliminated. Priests waved their staffs, showering the place with sparkles of golden light. Their faces were filled with smiles and joy of surviving this brutal battle. They only dared to shout at this moment, "We won! We won!" Helen also lifted her sword and shouted. Gradually, cheers resonated in the area. At this moment, Mr. Fang returned from the north of the Orc Kingdom with a large group of elves, dwarves, and human warriors. Before he could react, Mr. Fang was grabbed by the people and tossed high into the sky. Oh! Ahya! They shouted in joy and enjoyed the beautiful moment. The scene froze and seemed to have turned into a permanent image. Did you take the picture? Did you? Some elves were holding the new communication jades that they had bought online. Let me see. Let me see. They leaned over and looked. On the picture, Mr. Fang, who was being tossed into the sky, had a dejected expression on his face. Meanwhile, at the nation's summit, how is it? Everyone was intently staring at the spiritual spell visual projection operated by the group of mages. Done. Done. Covered in sweat, Hematon fiddled with the spiritual spell visual projection for a long while and finally made the visuals appear again. Where are they? Did he win? It seems so. Even Princess Isabella froze for a long while before she snapped back to her senses. He won just like that. What was that power he used? Sunlight. How come it looked like our power? What is going on? Again, the spiritual spell visual projection turned to the battleground at the Lianshan Principality. Here they are. The people at the nation's summit heard resonant and ocean-like cheers through the spiritual spell visual projection. The dwarves and elves all stood up while they watched the people on the spiritual spell visual projection. I think this is a victory that everyone should celebrate. They were influenced by the joyous atmosphere that they saw. They are all heroes. Only Saint Dolan and others from the Judgment Godly Palace were still thinking about the words that they heard from the continent of Immortal Relic. A bunch of noobs, don't ever come again, a bunch of noobs. Their faces all turned red. The situation was that the Judgment Godly Palace had ordered the retreat, and the so-called randomly mixed army won the war. How could they argue with that? They felt so choked with frustration that they almost explode. Next time, anyone who dares to order retreat will be punished according to the military rules. Princess Isabella glared at Saint Dolan and Sword Saint Claus while slamming her hand on the table in her palace. Sword Saint Claus's heart lurched, and he asked in a low voice, "Mr. Dolan, what do we do now?" Saint Dolan said, "From now on, no one mentions this. Time will erase everything." If they remained cool and downplayed it, this event would pass without drawing much attention. While Saint Dolan said that, things were still going on in the magic forum named Eye of Mystical Realms. The Blizzard braggers always bragged about how powerful the battles in World of Warcraft Mystical Realm are. Now with such a huge war going on, none of them actually joined the battle. In his messy alchemy room, the disheveled and stout mage posted a comment cheerfully. "I think we can make a big issue out of it." One Blizzard hater suggested under the comment. "We can take this opportunity to launch propaganda against them. Maybe we can destroy the reputation of the Blizzard workshop." Why do you hate them so much? A passing aristocrat who had remained neutral couldn't bear it anymore and replied. Another defender? An origins fighter. In the messy alchemy room, Sam, a mage and a bottom-level employee of the crystal workshop, scratched his messy hair and inhaled deeply as if he had just received a shot of stimulant. Anyone who dared to utter a different opinion in such a situation would be tagged as an origins fighter. They just spend their parents' hard-earned money on such trivial entertainment games that suppress their ambitions. Is there a single player of World of Warcraft who dares to enter the battleground? Several days have passed. Do you see any messages saying that they did anything for the war? A couple of days ago, Master Liwut and Master Oth released several posts, saying that we obtained the upper hand in the war under the leadership of the Radiant Light Godly Nation. Warriors of the Radiant Light Godly Nation had received training in the military mystical realms of Dulin Workshop. Just this morning, our Radiant Light Godly Nation reported that the battle is going well, and there's nothing to be worried about. The users of their mystical realms are probably engrossed in the scenery and entertainment. How can they do anything serious? I guess no one would want them to do even logistics and supporting work. Is there any reason for the trash mystical realms such as World of Warcraft to stay around and mislead more people? It's a tumor. The moment that the passing aristocrat made a comment, a string of replies appeared below it. Seeing that the passing aristocrat made no replies, Mage Sam was delighted. I think we should compile an intelligence report on this issue and post it on every magic forum. Mage Jian was a loyal fan of the Dulin Workshop and thought that this would be a holy thing to do. Look! If we destroy the Origins Internet Club and Blizzard Workshop, we would be greatly appreciated. Perhaps even Princess Her Highness would know about it. But I don't need their appreciation. I'm a very humble individual. Mage Jian thought to himself proudly. Soon, the Blizzard haters began to take over other magic forums. With only a few indignant passers-by posting some defending comments, the trashing comments were in a landslide on the magic forums. At this moment, Mage Sam suddenly received a prompt and saw someone replied to his post in the forum. Sorry, but the regular army that you mentioned fled, and we who can't even do logistics and support work saved the world. Think before you speak. How can you guys do that? Everyone turned silent under the post. How can it be? In the messy alchemy room, Mage Sam's face became distorted. How can it be? Faked. It must be faked. Yes. It must be faked. Immediately, he replied, you're not only a traitor but a faker now. At this moment, the Orc Kingdom and the neighboring small nations were all busy rebuilding their countries. Grand Mage Adolf spared some time to browse the posts in the forum and saw this comment. One more word, and you'll lose your qualification as a mage. Do you hear me? In the alchemy room, Sam lounged on his recliner lazily and chuckled when he read the reply on the magic forum. At this time, a mage who shared the room with him walked past. Sam pointed at the post on the magic forum and said, this moron said that he would cancel my qualification as a mage. That's hilarious. Then, he posted a reply, if you can, come through the magic network and bite me. If you can't, just shut up. Meanwhile, Grand Mage Adolf put away the magic letter. Some mages walked into the conference room of the Magic Union in the Morning Light Empire. They wore dark golden mage's robes with a hexagram pattern embroidered on the chest. Daikas immediately sat straighter. Among them was a lazy-looking middle-aged mage. With others flanking him, he obviously had a much higher status than others. Of course, Adolf knew this man. His name was Willie, and he was one of the top-level mages and the president of the World Magic Union. Beside him was an old mage whose white beard almost reached his waist. He was the vice president of the World Alchemist Union. Even Adolf, a level 9 mage, usually didn't have the opportunity to see these lofty and elusive people. In the conference room, the Emperor of the Morning Light Empire who had just returned from the battlefield also stood up. At this moment, these people bowed toward the mages including Adolf and Daikas. "Thank you for your great contribution," the middle-aged man said, "to show our appreciation to you who have made such a great contribution to the world and the Magic Union. The World Magic Union has decided to nominate you as candidates for the next Elder Council and award you with special honor badges." Adolf shook his head. "Sir, as traders and wastrels engrossed in game, I'm afraid that we're not worthy of this special honor." "What happened?" St. Willie's face instantly darkened. In the internal forums of major magic unions, there are many negative and defaming comments. A younger mage standing behind him said in a low voice, "Led by some mages, the haters would drown any defenders of Blizzard Workshop and users of these mystical realms with negative comments. The situation is the same in the internal forum of the Alchemist Union." Soon, Willie and the old alchemist began to browse the magic forums such as Eye of Mystical Realms, and their faces turned livid instantly. He slammed his palm on the desk before him and shattered it into dust. As one of the earliest players in the new shop, Mage Lily wasn't a local resident of the Morning Light Empire. Now, she returned to her home nation, the Reala Empire. Together with other mages who had battled in the war, she was visited by the nation's magic union led by a saint-level mage and the emperor. This event was broadcasted in the most famous magic forum in the nation as the special feature of the forum. Meanwhile, Mage Jian, a loyal fan of the Dulan workshop in the Reala Empire, had taken over the forums in the nation with a large group of haters. Posts appeared on the forums one after another. "Useless. What can the braggers of the Blizzard Workshop do? Don't let the Blizzard Workshop destroy the future of our people. Masters already confirm that using mystical realms in the Origins Internet Club is treason." Mr. Lilly, Mr. Lance, an old mage read the names with respect, took out his magic letter, and opened the forum. "I think you guys have heard of the Distant Stars Magic Forum before. I've been using it since I first knew about mages," Mage Lily said happily. The old mage opened the forum, intending to show them the nation's most famous magic forum. Then, he saw. "Don't let the Blizzard Workshop destroy the future of our people. Masters already confirm that using mystical realms in the Origins Internet Club is treason." Posts and comments jumped out one by one. The old mage instantly crumpled the magic letter as his expression turned cold. "What's happening?" The same scene happened not only in the Morning Light Empire and the Reala Empire but in all the other places in the world as well. The World Magic Union, Alchemist Union, Mercenary Union, and even the high-level officials in every nation all realized that this was a serious issue. At the Nations Union no one had expected that the high-level officials from various nations and forces would gather here again. Even Saint Dulan looked livid. He said in his palace, "Didn't I tell you explicitly to let this thing go down so that everyone will gradually forget about it? Who did it?" Some people had caused such a commotion that even all the masters of the world gathered here again just to talk about it. The projected figure of Saint Dulan had a very dark expression. "They slandered our heroes and made them suffer for no reason. I promise everyone that these people who did it will be punished for it. According to the information that my people have gathered, alchemists Soth and Leewood who call themselves masters gave the tag of treason to people who cultivate in the mystical realms in the Origins Internet Club. I don't know what their purpose is, but this kind of people are an insult to the title of masters." Sword Saint Wilson of the Morning Light Empire looked cold. "Treason." King Lydon of the Lianshan Principality sneered and said, "If we had more of such traitors, we wouldn't have suffered so many losses, and our soldiers wouldn't have to go through such cruel torture." Saint Willie stood up and said in a loud voice, "This operation's codename will be Heavenly Punishment. Regardless of who they are and where they hide, we'll catch all these scumbags." After some consideration, he realized that it would be hard to catch all of them. He added, "At least we'll catch all the insiders and leaders of such slanders so we can restore our heroes' honor and reputation. Does anyone have objections?" Everyone stared at Saint Dulan intently. Finally, 3 empires, various kingdoms, the dwarf clan, and the elf clan asked together, "Sir, I think your godly palace agrees with us, right?" Clank. In the hall where Saint Dulan sat in, the chair beneath him was instantly shattered to dust. He didn't have to disguise his anger in his own palace, but he knew that at this moment, all parties had to drop their grudges and work together on the issue of the Shadow Legion even if they were enemies before. Therefore, Saint Dullin suppressed his anger and said, "Of course." Chapter 759 3-year imprisonment at the least, execution by fire at the highest. Since this operation was led by the Magic Union and Alchemist Union and personally carried out by high-level officials from different nations and unions, it was done with ease. In the control room of Magic Forums in the headquarters of the Magic Union, the huge control room was filled with complicated magic runes, and bright blue energy lights flowed through the runes continuously. "Greetings, elders." The two mages who were guarding this place bowed with respect as several mages walked into the room. At this moment, Saint Willie was staring at the Magic Forum, the Eye of Mystical Realms. Meanwhile, in the messy alchemist room, Mage Sam was still posting his comments without restraint. He sent a message through the magic letter at the same time, "Masterly Wood, is it time for you to pay me?" As a professional hater, Mage Sam was very satisfied that he could trash the Blizzard braggers and Origins fighters whom he hated while earning a sizable income for it. At the same time, he had taken this opportunity to organize many comrades who would post negative comments about the Blizzard Workshop or Origins Internet Club for as low as 5 Radiant Light Bronze coins each. After all, even magic apprentices had access to magic letters. It was a good way to earn some extra money to pay for their tuition, so why wouldn't they? Of course, Sam was still the most active hater among them. At this moment, he was replying to Grand Mage Adolph's post and putting the whole process on a spiritual spell visual projection. He was quite popular and had even attracted many fans. "Didn't you say that you'd cancel my qualification as a mage? I'm a high-level mage of the Radiant Light Godly Nation. Where are you from? Talk to me after you can enter the Radiant Light Godly Nation." "We located him in the headquarters of the Magic Union," an old mage said. "Pass my order." Several priests stood before Saint Dullin in his palace. "Send the Judgment Knight Legion to catch all of them." "Are we really going to?" a priest asked in a shaky voice. "We need to do more. Now, we have to defend them." Dullin looked as if he had swallowed a dead fly when he said that. It felt terrible now that he had to defend his enemies. However, it must be done since it was no longer an issue of old grudges. It was something big that concerned the bottom line of every race on the whole continent. Obviously, whoever uttered any objections would die, at least for the time being. 3 minutes later in the discussion group of Sam's spiritual spell visual projection, someone said, "Ha ha ha. I think these guys are bursting with anger. It's nice to see them stomp in fury. Aren't you afraid that this person will come to the Radiant Light Godly Nation and look for you?" another person said with a laugh. "Afraid of what?" Sam said with a sneer. "I'm now in Domus City in the Radiant Light Godly Nation. They are welcome to try." Vam! 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 At this moment, someone knocked on the door. "Who is it?" Sam sounded impatient. "I need to go and get the door." Suddenly, a large group of knights dressed in golden armor swarmed in and pressed him down on the ground. The leader, a middle-aged knight, said chillingly, "Judgment Knight Legion. We suspect that you maliciously slandered the heroes who fought the Shadow Legion. You must come with us." Stunned, Sam's mind turned completely blank. The knight leader said coldly, "Note down all the people who have been watching this spiritual spell visual projection and who have posted comments. They'll all be tracked down." All the people watching the spiritual spell visual projection were stunned as well. Sam had never experienced such an incident before. Immediately, a foul odor of urine filled the room. He was so scared that he wet his pants. While the Orc Kingdom and the neighboring small nations started the reconstruction after the disaster, the Rila Empire, the Morning Light Empire, the Lian Shan Principality, and other nations sent out all their elite forces as if they were in another war and caught all the slanderers hidden all over the continent. The two masters, Liwud and Oth, were hunted down when they fled. While they were pulled out with their roots, a huge group named 5 Bronze Coins Party was also exposed. The members of this group posted each hating comment for 5 Radiant Light Bronze Coins to trash the players of World of Warcraft in the major forums. It even traced back to Payable of the Judgment Godly Palace. It was said that Payable was now locked in the anti-magic ice cell at the bottom of the prison of the Judgment Godly Palace. The others faced shame and at least 3-year imprisonments in their respective nations. As for Mage Sam, who was caught in the Radiant Light Godly Nation, this nation gave him the most severe punishment, execution by fire. The Radiant Light Godly Nation and the Judgment Godly Palace were more active than the other forces. As for the two masters, Oth and Liwud, one of them couldn't sustain the punishment and died in prison while the other would stay in his cell for a very long time. The White Pigeon Square of Kanglan City was broadcasting the feature report of this incident. Also, it did a special interview of the high-level officials from different nations and the heroes who had participated in the war. "Look! That's Mr. Fang!" Ron and some other young people exclaimed while sitting on a long bench on the square. On the spiritual spell visual projection, Mr. Fang sat casually before the projection with a good-looking female mage beside him. High-level officials from different nations sat around them. "Mr. Fang, what are your comments about it? For example, the magic forums made it easier for people to express themselves. Should we put some restraint on it?" The female mage asked with a professional smile. Although Mr. Fang had never done any show through the spiritual spell visual projection, he wasn't shy since he had done many live streams. "I think it is a good thing that the development of magic forums and spiritual spell visual projection in recent years made it easier for us to express ourselves. You can say whatever you want with these tools." Some people trash-talked major workshops such as the Blizzard Workshop and Soft Star Workshop on the forums. "What do you think of it, Mr. Fang?" the female mage asked again. "This," Mr. Fang replied, "everyone is entitled to their own opinions. You may think that one thing is good, but others might not think so. It's why we have forums where everyone can talk about their opinions. During the process, haters are inevitable. Usually, it's fine to be casual and have fun with some jokes. Even in my own live stream, some haters would like to see me make mistakes," Mr. Fang continued, "but there are some things and some people that we can't slander, such as the warriors who fight against invading armies and defend our nations. The freedom of speech doesn't mean that you can trash anyone and anything maliciously. Otherwise, you'll be punished." "Well said." The female mage teased him, "Maybe you'll have a new fan in the future, such as me." She ended with a smile. "Thank you again, Mr. Fang." At this moment, the previous posts could still be seen in the magic forum named the Eye of Mystical Realms. At this moment, replies appeared under them one by one. "Here are your 5 bronze coins. Get out." Now that the hardships and misunderstanding were in the past, BTIC, who was receiving the highest honor badge, the Morning Light of the Empire jointly awarded by the Empire and the Magic Union, showed a radiant smile of joy. The gloomy clouds finally cleared. On the royal square of the Morning Light Empire, the morning sunlight shined on the ground after the rain and clouds disappeared. "Look! A rainbow appeared," some kids exclaimed on the square. Chapter 760 The Myth in the Darkness Dark Souls. Task Target, Host, please improve your skills to a high-level skill ranks, Beginner, Elementary level, Intermediate level, Advanced level, Battle Master, Battle Grandmaster, Kingly Master, Godly Master. Mr. Fang thought for a moment and felt like this ranking system was similar to those in games. After remembering the system's job, he didn't think it was strange. Fang Qi saw that there were several levels after Godly Master, but they were not levels that he should think about right now. He glanced at his battle skill rank. The host's current battle skill rank, Battle Grandmaster. Task Objective, increase battle skills to the level of Kingly Master. Task Reward, the Dark Souls series. Task Description, Bro, Link the Fire. After receiving the task, Mr. Fang would play some old games such as Resident Evil 1 and 2 or The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3 to practice his battle skills and push up his limits. Some time had passed since the catastrophe in the Orc Kingdom and the neighboring nations. With help from caring people, the Orc Kingdom and the neighboring small human nations began to recover from the catastrophe. Of course, it would take a long time before they could return to their previous prosperity. But after the catastrophe, many people felt relieved. Fang Qi stretched as he looked at Resident Evil 2 on his screen. He had reached the end with a dagger. Besides, he reached Act 4 of Diablo 2 in Hell difficulty and the final duel with Chonglu in The Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3. During the process, he had gradually decreased his use of items in the game. After he made the achievements one after another, Mr. Fang heard a beep sound from the system. The task was completed, and the privilege to release Dark Souls 1 was granted. After the Burning Crusade was released, even the new shop witnessed a big growth in the number of new players. Despite the extra folding space that Mr. Fang had previously prepared and wasn't used, the new shop was now bursting with customers. The system version series games were usually released according to the sales of the previous game, so the Assassin's Creed series was still being released one by one. Besides, since the new expansion of World of Warcraft had just been released, the new players who entered the shop to play World of Warcraft wouldn't pay attention to other games yet. At this moment, Mr. Fang sat in his shop. "Little Sala, the shop released the trailer for a new game today. Don't you want to watch it?" Mr. Fang tried to lure her to watch it. "Oh. I'm trying to level up to level 70. Sala looked at the vast new land before her in excitement. "Wow! Is this the Outland? Look at that person, she has a flying mount." Helen grabbed Sala's arm and screamed. Mr. Fang was at a loss for words. Then, he looked at Harrison who was sitting nearby. The middle-aged assassin smiled embarrassedly and said, "My teammates are taking me to do a raid." On his screen was the huge gamesman's hall, and he was busy playing chess in the instance, Karajan. Resigned, Fang Qi came to the Yuanyang city shop. "Xiaoyu, boss, you are trying to trick me to play another horror game." With a pout, Zhang Xiaoyu pointed at the knight standing in darkness on the cover of the trailer and said in displeasure, "I won't be tricked this time. I won't play this game." Beside her, Little Belle covered her eyes and said, "I won't play horror games again. Never." This deer almost died in horror when it tried Outlast after watching Mr. Fang play the game with the hide-and-seek style. Sitting before the computer, Little Belle continued to control its Tauren character and do quests. "You won't play it? I'll play it myself." The good thing was that there was a huge number of players in the shops. On top of that, Mr. Fang was playing the game himself, and a small group of players followed him into the game. Therefore, this game had gradually reached the requirements for the sequels. By now, some time had passed since the Burning Crusade was released. Since the big raids took a long time to complete, even some high-level players began to have more free time at hand. Beep. The sales of Dark Souls 2 reached 1,000. The release of Dark Soul 3 begins. The cinematic trailer of Dark Souls 3 is activated. At this moment, Fang Qi finally heard the prompt of the system. Meanwhile, a dog-headed man had just got online and logged into QQ suddenly. This man saw a recommendation message. On the cover was a knight dressed in ancient armor and engulfed by sparks of fire which looked like the embers after wood was burned into ashes. "What's this? Dark Souls 3? I'm surprised." The dog-headed man widened his eyes. An actual new game. He clicked on it. Endless darkness appeared on his screen. The long, cold, and desperation-inducing darkness made the world look as if it was in a chaotic period. His gaze continuously traveled in the darkness. But then there was fire. As the ancient voice filled with visited sounded by his ears, sparks of flame appeared in the darkness. With fire, came disparity. On the desolate and bleak land that seemed lifeless, a blazing fire burned. Heat and cold, life and death, and of course, light and dark. An ancient presence rushed toward Mr. Dirk as if a long-sealed gate was opened. Following the footsteps of history, he returned to the beginning of the world with the appearance of the first life and the separation of light and dark. In the silence and desolation at the beginning of the world, the story began. The rain poured amidst thunder and lightning bolts. The ocean of clouds swept around like surging waves. The 4 statues of huge dragons sat in 4 directions. With deep and strong bell rings, gods rode huge ancient dragons and controlled golden lightning bolts, soaring in the high sky, just as praised by many myths and legends. In an ancient grand hall covered in ivies and vines, countless white candles of different lengths lit up like stars. Then, dark blood floated up and gathered in one place. A giant skull that had a crown slowly crawled out from the deepest darkness in the bottomless abyss behind the decayed skeleton cup. The pilgrim kneeled before the ancient and huge castle which was built on the high mountain as if it stood on the top of the world. I stand here. I'm the Lord of Cinder, and this is my throne. Death will destroy you again and again, only you will survive among the accursed ones. Words resonated in Mr. Dirk's ears while he watched the extremely ancient figure who seemed like it could only exist in myths and legends fly down on a huge dragon while the golden lightning light gathered in its hands. The holy thunderbolt was thrown down like the judgment from gods. The last scene that he watched was a golden lightning tribulation. Mr. Dirk's mouth was wide open, but he couldn't utter a sound the whole time. Then, he suddenly realized at the end of the trailer that even the words such as legend or epic couldn't begin to describe 0.01% of the wonder that he had just watched. He felt as if his entire brain was trembling. This is a myth. After putting down his virtual reality headset, he roared hoarsely in a trembling voice. A myth? Where? The elves twitched their pointy ears. They instantly swarmed up and stood behind him. These people didn't have time to notice other things until now. Due to his recent busy work, Mr. Dirk had just returned as well. At this moment, he pointed at the screen before him and said, "Didn't you watch it? It's the trailer for the new game." Immediately, he opened the trailer on his computer. Wow! A mystical realm on the myth level. Players exclaimed while watching the ancient and grand scenes which revealed the desolation and bleakness at the beginning of the world where everything had just begun growing. "I wonder how they made this mystical realm," an elf exclaimed. "Can we really play such a game?" The mysterious and powerful Blizzard Workshop and Soft Star Workshop had shown the greatness of gods in some mystical realms. For example, the Legend of Sword and Fairy showed the gods that seemed to have come from the East Continent, and World of Warcraft showed the existences that were close to gods or at a godly level. However, the players had never seen or even heard of a mystical realm that presented a true mythical era. It was because there were few descriptions about such an era even in legends. It was extremely difficult to make a mystical realm in such a setting. Which workshop made it? How come your workshops are all so awesome? Except for some special abilities, most abilities in World of Warcraft were easy to learn, which was great for legions and military training. It was the case at least in the recent versions of the game where the max level cap was level 60 and level 70. Therefore, for Saint-level masters, the abilities were not so alluring as to the average players, unless they decided to change classes and worship Holy Light to learn those resurrection spells. With so many priests and paladins in World of Warcraft, only a few players had mastered the resurrection spells. Saint-level masters wouldn't give up their own system just to learn these spells. Besides, Saint-level masters were usually busy. Unlike average players, they didn't have time to stay in the shop all day long. Meanwhile, in the Elf Kingdom in Silver Moon Forest, in the Royal Palace, First Elder Hyra was carefully reading the documents about the Elf clan's business from different places. Wearing a pair of round-framed glasses made of magic crystals, he looked like an old scholar. With care, he put stamps on the parchments and placed some of them aside for the Elf Queen to review. There was still a big pile of documents on the desk waiting for his attention. At this moment, his communication jade beeped on the desk. First Elder, a small reminder. A new mystical realm is just released. A mystical realm of the mythical era. Dark Souls 3. The message even had a trailer clip attached. Hyrule instantly stood up. Mythical era. He glanced at the documents on the desk. This is for me, this is for Her Majesty. I will stamp this one first. This needs Her Majesty's attention. Messages flooded the small discussion group in QQ for the Elf clan. Sala said, I wonder when Elder Hyrule will come. First Elder is very busy lately. I'm afraid he can't play. In the Elder Chamber. This one is for me. No. It's for Her Majesty. This one is, it's better for Her Majesty to take care of it. This one, needs Her Majesty's attention as well. The small pile of parchment on his right-hand side began to grow taller. First Elder. At this moment, Elf Queen Kelebel walked in. Kelebel looked at the desk and was at a loss for words. After a pause, First Elder Hyrule said expressionlessly, I put them in the wrong pile. He quickly took them back. Inside the new shop in Kanglan City. With the pace in World of Warcraft slowing down, a group of elves began to talk about the new game. Sala, when do you think the game will be released? The elves sat on the couches in the lounge area in a circle. Just for your ears, Sala waved at the others and told them to lean over. I heard from Xiaoyu that the shop owner calls this a warm-up. He will select a good date to release it. What date is a good date? Rowling, another member of the Snow Pigeon team, asked immediately. Xiaoyu said it's tomorrow. Sala revealed the news in a low voice. The shop owner said to Xiaoyu, tomorrow is a good day. Tomorrow is June 1st and your holiday. TL note, June 1st is Children's Day in China. Hey? Do we have a holiday tomorrow? The elves were delighted. At their homeland, June 1st is a holiday for people like us. Right. Sala said excitedly, it's said that all the games in the shop will have discounts tomorrow. The lowest is 30% off. If you buy 10 games, you'll get one old game or movie for free. Won't the shop owner lose lots of money? Rowling exclaimed, the stuff sold for 10 magic crystals will sell for only 7 magic crystals, which means that he will lose 3 magic crystals for each of the items he sells. Oh! Rowling took out money from her pocket and counted. Tomorrow, I'll buy 10. At this moment, many people in the Radiant Light Godly Nation, Dulin Workshop and Crystal Workshop were monitoring the shop closely. Outside the opened door, some figures were loitering. Hiss! The shop will lose 3 magic crystals from a mystical realm that originally cost 10 magic crystals. The customers will also get free stuff when buying 10 games? It means more losses. If 100,000 people come and buy stuff from the shop, isn't the shop going to go bankrupt? On the next day it was June 1st. The new shop and the old shops were all cleaned up and well decorated. For example, in the old shop in Yuanyang City, Jessica and her companions, who were both official novel translators and janitors, were dressed in thick Disney teddy bear costumes. How come there are 3 bears? The big white deer laughed upon entering the shop. Oh! Look over there! Zhang Xiaoyu exclaimed when she saw a young man wearing a light helmet and holding a strange-shaped iron-boned umbrella. Myriad Manifestation Umbrella. There! There! Mu Qing yelled, isn't that Jing Tian's family? Wow! That's a Pikachu sitting there! In the new shop in Kanglan City, Sala exclaimed with stars in her eyes. Let's sit over there! Sir! Sir! Activate it for me! I want to activate 10 games! Rowling read the game list and said, my goodness! When were Dark Souls 1 and 2 released? Activate all 3 of them for me! Meanwhile, she felt guilty that she only found out the key to the victory of the Alliance army after the war at the Lianshan Principality. Therefore, she decided to go and experience it in person. Meanwhile, in the Elder Hall where First Elder Hyrule lived. First Elder Hyrule straightened his robe and was about to set off. First Elder. Elf Queen Kelebel walked over and asked, "Can you do me a favor?" First Elder Hyrule froze for a second. Remembering the previous incident, he felt guilty and said immediately, "I'll do my best." Wonderful. Kelebel took out a big pile of parchment from her storage space and placed them on First Elder Hyrule's desk. "I have more important business to attend to. Thank you very much." Then, she left in a hurry. First Elder Hyrule, who was ready to set off, stared at the desk in a daze and then at the direction that the Elf Queen had taken. He slumped onto his chair and murmured, "I." Having stayed in the Elf Royal Palace for a long time, Kelebel thought that her knowledge about the world was outdated. After all, some things couldn't be understood by merely reading intelligence reports. Therefore, she felt it was necessary to know the world better, which was more important than dealing with the tedious documents and was an urgent business for her right now. 3 days are enough." Before she set off, she had made a good plan for her journey. "But I can't let them know about it." Kelebel changed into exquisite body-fitting leather armor, took off her crown, and pulled her hair up in a neat ponytail. After holstering a long bow and a long sword, she changed her looks slightly with some spells and turned into a heroic-looking elf rogue. Although saint-level masters were rare, this continent was vast with a large population, which meant that the number of saint-level masters was not as little as one might imagine. After pushing open the door and entering the shop, Kelebel looked around and spotted a few saint-level masters. "Isn't that Saint Wilson? The nation-protecting sword saint? Isn't that Saint Lydon from Lianshan Principality?" The stout middle-aged man looked elated while he made a list. "Sir, I want these 10 games including all of the Dark Souls series. Please activate Dark Souls 3 for me." Mr. Fang was busy selling membership cards and activating the new game when a tall and slim female elf walked up. "My name's Kelly, an elf rogue. Please activate Dark Souls 3 for me too." "This elf? I didn't ask your name. How come you sound as if you are afraid that I would mistake you for someone else?" "A new elf." Mr. Fang took her money and activated the game for her with a puzzled expression. Kelebel came just in time. It was early morning, and many players of the Zhuhua City Shop, Half City Shop, and Yuanyang City Shop had just begun to try this game. Accompanied by a hymn-like song, the dark scene before the players looked extremely mysterious and weird. The deep bell toll added an explicable heaviness to the scene. Yes, indeed. It is called Lothric, where the transitory lands of the Lords of Cinder converge. In venturing north, the pilgrims discover the truth of the old words, "The fire fades and the lords go without thrones." When the link of the fire is threatened, the bell tolls, unearthing the old Lords of Cinders from their graves. Even though they didn't know what the old words were about, the players sensed that this was the beginning of a desolate and weird world where all life forms were being born from the simple introduction in the opening cinematics. They could tell that it was totally different from any world they had known about. One after another, the ancient Lords of Cinder crawled out from their coffins, and big puddles of black wet mud oozed from its decrepit coffin. Aldrich, Saint of the Deep. In a ruined tomb covered by mist, tall and thin knights wearing unique helmets with sharp horns slowly stood up while leaning on their huge swords. Farron's Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers. The ground quaked violently as a mountain-like figure sat up from an extremely huge stone coffin. Under the hooded chainmail that the giant wore on his head, there was a deep black hole on his face, and a hoarse roar came out from the black hole with a destructive storm. And the reclusive lord of the profaned capital, Yhorm the Giant. What's this? This scene had gone beyond every player's understanding of the world as they saw nothing but destruction and ruins. Even the kings and saints in this world were nightmarish existences. Elf Queen Kelebel and the other saint-level masters shivered uncontrollably at this scene, wondering, what kind of world is this? The elves, knights, and some saint-level masters who were watching the opening cinematics put down their virtual reality headsets subconsciously. Looking around, they saw the same grimness and horror on each other's faces. Only, in truth, the lords will abandon their thrones, the ancient voice on the screen continued. And the unkindled will rise. Nameless, accursed undead, unfit even to be cinder. And so it is, that ash seeketh embers. After choosing one's class, the bell tolled. The players controlled their own characters and climbed out of the unnamed ancient stone coffins in a bleak graveyard. The stone coffins and tablets that were randomly scattered on the ground and the grey lifeless valley filled with grey mist made the world look like a nightmare. If it was a myth and a legend, then it only existed in a world of nightmares. It looked even weirder and creepier than a nightmare. It was the opposite of the beautiful and prosperous land that the players knew about. It was full of darkness and despair, waiting for destruction. Undead? No, they were not undead since the deep sleep after death was a luxury for them. They were the nameless, accursed unkindled that were unfit to be lords of Cinder. After they died, they couldn't obtain a peaceful deep sleep. Instead, they were resurrected near the fire and continued to die again and again in this nightmarish world until their spirit collapsed and they became hollow corpses without consciousness. How come there is such a strange world? At this moment, Su Tianji had turned on her live stream. With a horrified expression, she controlled her character to walk out cautiously. This looks scary. I'll try playing it for a while. As for the destiny of the Lords of Cinder and why they didn't want to take the glorious thrones of lords, it was easy to understand when the players saw the words Cinder and link the fire. They would have to burn themselves up to rekindle the fire. The origin of linking the fire could be traced back to the very ancient times, as shown in Dark Souls 1. Fire brought everything to the world, and the creatures that first discovered fire had gained extremely great power from it. These creatures were the first group of gods in this world. However, fire would eventually die out, which would mean the end of the world. To stop the invasion of darkness, Gwyn, a lord of Cinder, the first god who had gained the golden lightning power from the first flame and was the leader of the godly race, chose to burn his powerful soul to maintain the fire. That was why not everyone could link the fire. Each Lord of Cinder had to be one of the top existences of the world or even, a god. Containing the power of the first flame, these beings were the most powerful existences. Some of them were powerful gods or existences more powerful than gods. The unkindled ash, as the name indicated, were not strong enough to rekindle the flame, and thus were existences who were as lowly as ash. These were the characters that the players controlled. It was why the old words said, Ash seeketh ember. Therefore, Dark Souls was totally different from any game that the shop had previously released, either in the world views or the battle styles. When facing an existence who was countless times more powerful than you could only rely on battle skills that could even subdue gods and the moderate growth in strength that you obtained during the process. The only thing that you could use to help you battle to the end was probably the rusty weapon that you had when you climbed out from the tomb. You must rely on these things to kill the gods. Mingxiu said that this game is super difficult. Sala and some elves were talking about the game. The other newbies in Mr. Fang's shops obviously hadn't realized this. Difficult. Leiden and other saint-level masters sitting nearby said in amusement, I think it might be only difficult for average people. We're saint-level masters, and raiding instances in World of Warcraft was quite easy. Elf Queen Kelebel also thought, I'm close to the pinnacle stage of saint level, how can a mystical realm be difficult for me? There are grave goods? Gemstones. Kelebel felt that it was cheating to be given such good items at the beginning of the game. Therefore, she chose to take nothing. After choosing to be a sorceress, she entered the game. The Cemetery of Ash was located in a desolate valley. Besides the players, there were only a few deserted corpses that lost their mind, which was the inevitable fate for the unkindled. At this moment, Elf Queen Kelebel was dressed in a slightly dirty white robe with a small round shield in one hand and a slim sword that looked like a decor piece in the other hand. Obviously, elves liked these kinds of swords. Due to her current low level, she didn't have magic spells, but elves could cast spells as well as fight in close range. Disturbed by her steps, a mindless deserted corpse lunged at her with a snarl. Kel-Ebel cast the initial sorcery, Soul Arrow, and pierced the corpse's chest with a streak of pale blue magic light. Then, she killed it with a clean sword slash. Simple. She was still uncomfortable that her strength was reduced to that of an average person. Putting down her virtual reality headset, she looked around and mumbled, "Who said that this game was difficult? It's simple in the beginning." Having finished his instant noodles at the counter, Mr. Fang was walking toward his computer. He glanced at her when passing by and said, "This is the tutorial for new players, it teaches you some basic controls, and there is a boss for new players. It's simple." "Is it so? I have to fight my way to the later stages if I want to challenge something difficult." Kel-Ebel looked displeased, wondering why she couldn't directly skip to the more difficult stages. Anyway, she had to find the easy boss for new players first. Walking out of the cemetery of ash, she saw a narrow mountainous path. The terrain was simple but very dim. If she didn't venture to the branch paths, she could easily find the path out of the cemetery. The tall and thick city walls and the huge stone arch gate guarded by a few deserted corpses formed the portal leading to the outside world. Walking through the gate, Kel-Ebel saw a big round square. In the center of the square was a giant wearing heavy armor which appeared to be made of neither gold nor stone. Right now, this giant was half kneeling. Even when half kneeling, this giant was much taller than her. It was silent as if it was dead. However, the black tentacle-like things on its back seemed to be moving. "Sir, I can go out after defeating this thing, right?" Seeing Mr. Fang sitting not far from her, Kel-Ebel put down her virtual reality headset and called out to him. "Right. That's Ihud X Gundur," Mr. Fang called out. Many years had passed, but Mr. Fang still remembered the full name of the boss in the tutorial. "How do I fight it?" Kel-Ebel looked at it. "Should I pull out the sword from its chest?" After asking that question, she slowly pulled the coiled sword from the giant's chest with all her strength. The giant seemed to recover its senses and slowly stood up. Kel-Ebel could see its pitch-black and distorted demonic face and the black and cold eyes behind the grey helmet that seemed to have come from an abyss. When it lifted the huge halberd that was almost 6 meters long, the warrior who seemed to have come from the ancient times and had survived many horrifying battles came back to life. Kel-Ebel's heart lurched. Gundur was nimbler than she expected and brandished his huge halberd, creating whistling sounds. Looking down at her slim sword that was as small as a toothpick, her ragged sorceress robe, and the small round shield which had been smashed to an unrecognizable shape, Kel-Ebel was petrified. With a scream, she ran toward the gate that she walked through but found that it was sealed by magic. She hammered at the gate wildly. Gundur bent its knees a bit and leaped up into the sky like a cannonball. Then, it struck down its 6-meter-long halberd with vicious force. Boom! 10 seconds later a cold corpse lay on the ground, and a line of bloody words appeared on Kel-Ebel's screen, "You died." 10 hours later, having played games for an entire day, Mr. Fang stretched and stood up to get something to eat. He glanced at Kel-Ebel's screen when walking past here. "You're still in the novice village." Kel-Ebel was at a loss for words. While gritting her teeth, she turned her head and glared at Mr. Fang with murderous spirit. When it swung its head and tail, more than half of the big arena became a death zone. With eyes emitting vicious red light, it ravaged its opponent wildly even after the latter was dead, shattering the body and the ground to dust. "You told me that this is a tutorial for beginners." At this moment, he had the urge to return to the coffin. By now, most players had reached the limit of playtime for today. Is this mystical realm for people to use? Kel-Ebel was still thinking about how to fight Gundur when she got offline, wondering if anyone could defeat it. She thought to herself. "After all, I'm a saint-level master. Since I can't pass it, no one could defeat this boss, right?" At this moment, she heard an exclamation, "My goodness! Someone passed it!" "What?" Following the sound, she saw a large group of elves sitting on the couches in the lounge area with some knights from the Golden Griffin Knight Legion. They were watching the live stream from the continent of Immortal Relic. "Some of them are super powerful," Commander Elvin exclaimed in astonishment. "This senior has passed it for a while now." Sala pointed at her communication jade and said. "Kel-Ebel almost died of shame and humiliation. How come some people are so powerful?" Instantly, she had the feeling that her elves would follow others if she didn't work hard. Of course, as the queen of the elf clan, she hoped that these elves would admire her. On the next day before Mr. Fang opened the door, he saw an elf standing outside. How come she is so eager to play? Fang Qi found that this elf came by herself every day. "Don't you have friends to come with you?" Mr. Fang asked while opening the door. Ignoring him, Kel-Ebel hurried over to a computer. She looked haughty and had the presence that she was busy and didn't want to talk. "Since someone passed it, I just don't believe that I can't do it." After all, she had reached the saint level, which meant that her talent wasn't poor. After her practice all day long yesterday, she had accumulated some experience. A while later, after dying many times, the battered character controlled by Kel-Ebel narrowly dodged Gundar's swipe with its huge withered claws. She rolled sideways and got close to Gundar, deciding to head into danger and risk it all for the chance to win. She thrust out her sword. "I passed it! I passed it!" she exclaimed while wiping her sweat. The elves were always alert to all kinds of disturbances in the shop. Sure enough, a group of elves walked over with bowls of instant noodles in their hands. On the screen, Gundar's huge body fell down, and some of the strength in the corpse and soul was drawn out and absorbed by the player, which could be used to increase their stats later on. Of course, the collected souls could be used as the unique currency in this world to buy items as well. Meanwhile, the embers in Gundar's body gradually lit up in the body of the character that Kel-Ebel controlled. Through the looted ember, the players could increase their max HP. Kel-Ebel had indeed passed the stage. "My goodness! How did you pass it?" one elf asked humbly. "Ha ha ha ha!" Kel-Ebel felt satisfied but remained calm on the surface, acting like she was still engrossed in the game. "This," Kel-Ebel earnestly concluded while she continued playing, "this is in fact not difficult. Different from other games, this game almost had no shortcuts. The players must completely rely on their own battle skills, combat techniques, and meticulous control of details." At this moment, the character that Kel-Ebel controlled finally pushed open the huge stone gate that had been sealed for many years behind Gundar. As a heavy boom noise sounded, she finally saw the world outside the gate. Walking up along the mountainous path, she saw an ancient stone hall fire link shrine. When the coiled sword was inserted into the center of the shrine and the bonfire was lit up, the journey for the tutorial would come to an end. Opposite to the entrance of the fire link shrine were 5 huge thrones under the illumination of randomly placed white candles. These were the thrones for the Lords of Cinder. A crestfallen warrior sat beside the thrones. The fire link shrine had only an entrance but no exit or any other paths leading to the outside. "Skills, can you explain it in detail?" Sala asked while watching this strange elf play the game. Obviously, she had been stuck at Gundar for a long time now. Of course. Elf Queen Kel-Ebel had been admired and praised by elves all day long before, but she had felt nothing special at the time. But now, she had a great sense of achievement. "Let me find a boss who is more powerful than this one." At this moment, many more players walked over and watched her play. "Someone in our shop passed it too?" Helen asked in surprise. "Yet. She might be the first one in our shop." A few saint-level masters also looked over. There was no exit in the fire link shrine, and Kel-Ebel came back after walking around it. Of course, the deserted corpses outside were not her targets. She walked up along the path on the left-hand side close to the cliff and saw a person totally different from the deserted corpses. "This monster looks different. I'll use it as an example to show you the skills." After all, she had killed the boss, which meant that she was unrivaled in this novice village. Okay. The viewers behind her nodded repeatedly. On the path of the cliff, a thin man wearing ragged clothes walked over with a long saber. He looked even worse than a beggar. Here. While holding her slim sword, Kel-Ebel explained confidently, the most important thing about battle skills is that you must control your movements meticulously and understand yourself better. When you can control your movements perfectly, you can deal with any enemies with ease. With that said, she stabbed at the opponent when the latter came within her attack range. Clank! A saber light flashed, and a muffled noise sounded. Her sword was sent flying. Since she grasped onto her sword tightly, her arms moved back as well. A strange force bounced back all her force, and her whole body turned numb as if she had been smashed by a huge hammer. Then, she watched as her opponent pierced the saber into her chest. Words appeared on her screen, "You died." Dumbfounded, Kel-Ebel looked at the screen with a dull expression. Everyone behind her was at a loss for words. So, they were weak only in comparison with other enemies in Dark Souls. This one looks more powerful than the average hollow. Is it an elite hollow? The elves standing behind her murmured to each other. She was instantly killed by an elite hollow after defeating Gundur, which means that she must have passed it with luck. Let's go. I don't want to watch it anymore, one elf said. I passed it with luck. Indignant, Kel-Ebel resurrected and raced to the elite hollow again with gritted teeth, determined to kill it today. I was careless, she yelled, I assure you that I can pass it this time. She ran to the thin man who was dressed in ragged clothes and holding a long saber. As long as I control my movements well and watch out for his attacks, he can't hit me. This time, Kel-Ebel was obviously more cautious. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang was checking his bag after killing the boss. He glanced at a piece of ragged clothes accidentally and saw 2 lines in the item description. A terribly worn shirt. Men are fond of weaving tales to explain the raggedness of their garb. My sixth sense warned me of danger, and I danced between flurries of blades, unscathed, but alas, my clothes went to tatters. 1 day later there was not a single elf watching Kel-Ebel play. Mr. Fang glanced at her screen when passing by. How come you're still in the novice village? Can't you keep your mouth shut? She almost exploded in anger. Several days later, some saint-level masters gathered in the lounge area of the shop. Have you passed the tutorial for the beginners? Don't even mention it. After I defeated Gundur, I got out just now after being beaten for a whole day by that sword master. I'm in a worse situation, another saint-level master complained in tears. I thought that the crestfallen warrior sitting by the thrones of Lords of Cinder was an enemy, and I struck at him twice. Now, I deleted my account and started again. Why? He hunted me down each time I resurrected, again and again. The saint-level master looked to be on the verge of a mental collapse. I haven't been able to defeat it yet. They had been tortured mercilessly in the game. No. Saint Lydon thought it wasn't fair that they were tortured alone. Saint Wilson, Saint Lydon, and the other saint-level masters exchanged a look in the lounge area and found that they shared the same thought. We can recommend this mystical realm to other people. Instantly, they sat closer in a circle and discussed in low voices. How about Saint Willie? Saint Willie was the president of the World Magic Union and one of the ultimate figures. Mr. Saladin is also good. Lydon said. Yet. The others instantly looked at each other and had the tactical understanding. How about Ms. Joanna from the Alchemist Union? They were talking about the mature-looking woman dressed in a fiery red mage's robe who also had participated in the war against the Shadow Legion. How about Saint Hematon? World Mage Hematon was also called Proud Hematon, which meant that he was a man who took great pride in himself. And how about, ha 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 ha, the atmosphere in the lounge area instantly turned from suffocating to cheerful. While the saint-level masters were stuck in the first stage for a long time in the old shop, the players in the old shops obviously fared much better. At this moment, a dog-headed man was intently watching a live stream on his communication jade while sitting on the sofa. Sitting nearby, the elves and knights each held a communication jade, and they were also engrossed in live streams. The players could teleport from the bonfire in the Firelink Shrine to the high wall of Lithric. Only by coming to this grand wall did the players truly walk out of the novice zone. There were only hollows on the abandoned city walls which were as wide as streets on which 4 horse-drawn carriages could travel on in parallel. A huge dragon's corpse was left dried up and weathered on the wall. Countless hollowed corpses kneeled before the huge dragon, like pilgrims. Rowling was now watching Su Tianji's live stream. How is this streamer? Xiaoyu said that she is an entertainment streamer, Sala said. At this moment, Su Tianji was playing the game connected with Nalan Mingxiu and some other players. Dark Souls could be played online. Each player's game world was like a parallel plane. When a player left a sign on the ground, other players with embers could see the sign and summon the player who had made the sign to their own world in the form of spirits. Of course, some NPCs also left signs since the players were not the only unkindled ashes in this world. It says that she is a technical streamer. Rowling glanced at the streamer introduction. At this moment, Su Tianji controlled her game character to cleanly kill the deserted corpses on the high wall with her teammates. Meanwhile, she said, "How come I feel like some people keep saying that I'm an entertainment streamer?" A row of bullet comments shot up. That's a good assessment. Who said that? Well said. You bunch of haters. I'm furious. While brushing back her slightly messy, wind-blown hair, Su Tianji looked forward and saw a huge fire-breathing dragon close to 100 meters long was coiled on the top of the high wall. Below it, the door to the round tower was locked. Hollow corpses and pus-covered creatures like Gundar were everywhere in this abandoned city. Despite the danger and mysteries that seemed to lurk everywhere, people couldn't help wondering if some treasures were hidden in this place. The dragon spat out fire and burned most of the monsters on the city wall to ashes. Guys, look! Do you think the dragon is guarding some treasures? Su Tianji's acute senses seemed to detect something. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coiling up there. Here's the plan. You guys divert the attention of the dragon, and I'll slip down to the round tower to check it out. Su Tianji thought that she needed to show off some of her techniques. Otherwise, people will always think that I'm an entertainment streamer. Nalan Mingxiu gave her a okay hand gesture. Then, she ran down the path beneath the huge dragon. Sure enough, the huge dragon inhaled deeply and then spat fire. At this moment, Nalan Mingxiu had run to the guard tower on the opposite side. The wall of the guard tower was so thick that even dragon fire couldn't penetrate it. Meanwhile, Su Tianji slipped into the building under the huge dragon. What do you think of my techniques? Su Tianji said smugly. This streamer seems to have good techniques, Rowling exclaimed. Su Tianji opened the iron door and saw an old deserted room. It was messy with some old and used items, which showed that this room had once been used by someone. At first glance, there seemed to have nothing valuable in it. Then, she spotted a giant old chest on the first floor below her. Oh! There are indeed treasures. Su Tianji's beautiful eyes lit up. Walking to the chest, she opened it and said smugly, "Am I not awesome? This is called intuition. I'll see who dares to call me entertainment stria. Will you?" Before she could finish, the chest opened its huge mouth full of sharp teeth and swallowed her. The viewers saw Su Tianji's legs wildly kicking around outside the chest. Woo! Then, her legs straightened and turned stiff. You died. Died. Thanks to Entertainment Elder for the gift of awesome. Thanks to, how did you die? How come so many people are showering you with gifts again? Nalan Mingxiu and the others were stupefied. I don't know. Su Tianji didn't know what to say. You guys come here. When I opened the treasure chest, it turned into a monster. The chest turned into a monster. After putting down her virtual reality headset, Nalan Mingxiu looked over and saw on Su Tianji's screen that the treasure chest stood up and changed into a pitch-black thin monster with a big tongue dangling out of its mouth. It was wandering in the room right now. "We're coming." Using the same tactic, Nalan Mingxiu dodged the huge dragon's fire and dashed into the room. Then, she heard the monster's deep snarls. Then, she went downstairs. Suddenly, she heard a strong wind howling sound. Boom! Nalan Mingxiu felt as if her whole body was struck by a meteorite. Even the extremely hard wall behind her was shattered into dust. Words appeared on her screen. "You died." She was stupefied. Even the viewers in the news shop were dazed. "How come you're dead too?" Song Qingfeng, who was still outside, froze. "I was killed instantly." He looked over at Nalan Mingxiu's screen and saw that her whole body was smashed into the wall. Instantly, they sensed deep malice and a scheme. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang had just beaten the boss before him to near death and then put on the helm that resembled the mimic chests. The description flashed across the item. "Symbol of avarice, head of the avaricious creature that mimics treasure chests. The ancient godly race. The very form of this creature is thought to be a form of brand, a punishment for sin. Perhaps affected by the imminent fall of darkness, the dying flame, or the curse of the unkindled, they finally became such monsters after death. Different from other games, in Dark Souls, the players could go through the main storyline without knowing anything except for linking fire. In fact, the players didn't even need to know why they were doing this. However, if the players collected the objects, items, and souls, they would get the complete story about the world by piecing together the information and clues that these things provided. These things contained countless heavy and dark stories from the ancient times. After leaving Fire Link Shrine, the player's mission was to bring back the Lords of Cinder. In the meantime, the players embarked on a journey of exploration of the whole dark world. Walking down the high wall of Lithric, one could see a huge abandoned hall where the hard and thick floor had been smashed several feet down into the ground by something. Zhongwu, Gu Tingyun, and others stood in the hall with grim expressions. A hill-like wild beast wearing thick ice armor roared before them with a huge hammer in its hand. It spat out frost air which instantly swept across the whole hall. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang returned to the Fire Link Shrine and handed a soul to the only remaining Lord of Cinders, Ludwolf of Kurland, who was a pygmy. In Dark Souls, the pygmies referred to humans since all the other races were taller than humans. The soul burned like flames. When it was picked up, there was the item description. Vord was once an outrider knight who served under Pontiff Sullivan. He served alongside the Dancer of the Boreal Valley until their transformation. Soon, it was turned into a ring that had a weird black eye on it. Pontiff's right eye, bewitched ring that Pontiff Sullivan bestowed upon his knights. Knights who peer into the black orb are lured into battles of death, transformed into frenzied beasts. No wonder the Pontiff only provides these rings to those dispatched to foreign lands. That was the general idea of the story. If the players explored deeper into the world, they would gather more information about the plot little by little. According to the progress of the game, the first Lord of Cinder that they would encounter was Farron's Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers. Next, they would encounter Aldrich, who devoured gods. Then, the Yhorm, the giant of the profaned capital. Afterward, it was the Prince of Lithric. The final part was the story of the main character, the nameless person without a past. Right now, the players had just defeated the first few bosses and were at the stage of the Abyss and Farron's Undead Legion. In fact, ever since their encounter with Gundur, the players began to get in touch with the Abyss. The horrifying people covered in pus were the result of the erosion by the Abyss. The power of Abyss originated from darkness, it came even earlier than the first flame. At this moment, Sala and other elves were progressing very slowly in the game, but it didn't stop them from watching live streams. They were now sitting on the couches in the lounge area in a circle. Look at this senior, obviously, they were watching Nalan Hunggu's live stream. Nalan Hongyu had obviously played Dark Souls 1 and thus had more advantages over others. The players walked out of the gate behind the Boreal Valley, flew over Lothric City which was divided into two halves by the Broken Mountain, and walked through the Crucifixion Woods and down the Road of Sacrifice. Then, they would reach Farron Keep. This was the front line of resisting the Abyss. Sala was now watching the live stream in which the crestfallen warrior in Firelink Shrine was telling the information about Farron's undead legion with a mocking and somewhat sad tone. Gaining admission to the legion is a matter of some ceremony. Inside their keep, snuffing out the flames of 3 altars opens the door to the wolf blood. Sworn by the wolf's blood to contain the Abyss, the legion will bury a kingdom at the first sign of exposure. The initial mission of Farron's undead legion, Watchers of Abyss, was monitoring the Abyss. When the bell tolled, they woke up from deep sleep. In confusion, they sensed the restlessness in the Abyss under Farron Keep and chose to perform their initial mission. They crawled out from their tombs and returned to their previous posts. On the screen of the live stream at this moment, more people walked over and stood behind them, including some newly arrived Saint-level masters. Sala glanced back. So many people. At this moment, Nalan Hongyu controlled his character to push open the gate which had been sealed for many years. They saw such a scene. Piles of corpses were inside, and the horrid army that could easily destroy a nation now only had a few of its members remaining standing. The tall captain pierced one of its comrades through the chest with his huge sword, and the corpse slowly fell down. Then, another one got up with dark eyes that had crimson lights flashing in them. When you look long into an abyss, the abyss looks into you. None of them could escape the fate of being eroded by the abyss. The unkindled resurrected endlessly, and the captain, the only one who had consciousness, had to kill his teammates again and again. At this moment, he seemed to notice that someone had extinguished flames of 3 altars and came in through the gate. He slowly turned around. With his huge sword in his right hand pointing forward and his dagger in his left hand resting on his right arm, this man performed the unique greeting gesture of the undead legion. To perform his obligation or accept the destiny to link the fire, all this would be decided by this battle. Gundur, Vord of the Boreal Valley, the stinky and poisonous swamp in Farron Keep, the omnipresent basilisks that could cast curses and cause instant death, and the most ancient dark wraiths. All players, regardless if they were newbies or veterans, had to go through hundreds of deaths before they could come before the First Lord of Cinder Farron's undead legion. Each battle with an enemy or a boss was a fierce combat. Obviously, Nalan Hongyu had gone through countless deaths before he came here. This might be the most dangerous experience for him, so he acted extremely cautious. In fact, the process was so torturous that even Kel Ebel, a saint-level master, wanted to quit the game at this moment. After all, they were knocked down on the ground and tortured by all kinds of enemies and bosses each day. Sala and the other elves were even worse. Over 90% of them were forced into defeat by Gundur. They felt like they might not be able to clear the stage for the rest of their lives. However, this didn't stop them from watching others clear stages on livestream. Meanwhile, the famous streamer Mr. Dirk obviously didn't want to be a lazy player. After all, everyone was now talking about this new game. Therefore, he sat on a couch and watched the livestream carefully to get himself familiar with the process, so he wouldn't be tortured too much when he did his own livestream. Almost every battle in Dark Souls was a fight against an opponent much stronger than oneself. At this moment, Nalan Hongyu held his dark sword and performed a military salute at his opponent. Seeing this scene, the viewers felt that this legion might not be a great lord, but they were definitely a group of competent soldiers. These beings were admirable regardless of which choice they made, whether they did what they did due to their obligation as soldiers or their destinies as lords. Only Nalan Hongyu, a veteran military man, could relate to their dilemma. 2 swordsmen dressed in the Undead Legion's unique red capes and helms with pointy horns charged at Nalan Hongyu with strange steps. They used a moveset associated with the Farron Greatsword. Different from the 2-handed swords that were as thick as a door in Final Fantasy, these huge swords that were nearly 2 meters long didn't look heavy. The blades were as thick as an arm, and they could cover a large area around the user while also being very nimble. The daggers in their left hands could make up for most of their weak spots when they slashed out with the great swords. The silver sword light covered dozens of meters in one instant like a waterfall. Meanwhile, Nalan Hongwu reacted quickly by clearly rolling out of the attack range. The stones on the ground exploded into debris by this sword strike. Obviously, Nalan Hongwu made a small mistake in judgment. The slashing blade thrust up heavily toward him again as dust and whistling debris permeated the air. The swiftness and the perfect control of movements were astonishing. Even if they were at the same level of strength, it was extremely difficult for Nalan Hongwu to fight such an opponent who was experienced and used excellent sword techniques, not to mention that Nalan Hongwu's physical strength and speed were inferior to those of his opponent. At this moment, a sword beam shot across the whole battleground like a shooting star and pierced his arm instantly. With red lights flashing in his eyes, this figure was a member of the Undead Legion who had been eroded by the abyss and was being resurrected again and again. As the captain of Farron's Undead Legion, he had to accept the tragic fate that he must fight his former comrades and pierce their chests with swords. The battle continued. Since the duel became a chaotic battle of 3 sides, the pressure on Nalan Hongwu greatly decreased. Finally, the Abyss Watchers tried to get up but couldn't. Eventually, he dropped to the ground listlessly. He died just like this. For some reason, the elves only felt deep sorrow instead of the joy of victory for clearing the stage. Even Nalan Hongwu was silent. Perhaps these people also hoped that this admirable legion could die with dignity. At this moment, they saw flames lighting up. Above the countless silent corpses on the ground, lots of wolf blood flew into mid-air and gathered in one direction. Flames lit up on the capes and sets of armor. The sparks of fire illuminated the dark like countless fireflies in the darkness. A blazing flame instantly shot out from the sword handle and swallowed the body of the sword like a crimson fire pillar. Supporting his weight with the long sword of flame, the fallen soldier returned. He slowly got up from the ground, just like when the god valiantly issued a challenge to the abyss and the endless darkness many years ago. But this time, his eyes had turned blood red. By now, the darkness from the abyss had devoured the consciousness of all the legion members. However, this was the true power of a Lord of Cinder. The real duel had just begun. Engulfed by blazing flames, the huge sword was waved high in the air, lighting up the dim hall. My goodness! At this moment, even Kelebel, Leiden, and other saint-level masters were staring at the screen without blinking. The heated flames seemed to burn up the air as the big sword of flame that was over 2 meters long was swung, attacking viciously and making it hard for his opponent to even breath. My goodness! How did he do this? A dog-headed man on the side yelled in astonishment as he watched the member of Farron's Undead Legion on the screen dodging several of Nalan Hongwu's sword strikes with extremely weird steps. Not only the elves, but glints flashed in the eyes of the saint-level masters behind them. Ah! This sword technique is so cool! Sala exclaimed. The battle finally ended after a long time. Then, the viewers watched as Nalan Hongwu went to the Fire Link Shrine and traded the soul of Farron's Undead Legion for a big sword of the same style. As if he had instantly mastered this sword technique, he brandished the sword in Fire Link Shrine with weird steps. This is the sword technique. Even Saint Leiden, who was standing in the back, exclaimed, "Can we learn it? Watch me." The first move is like this. Sala copied the move while still watching the live stream. Watch me! Watch me! These are the next 2 moves. The elves copied the moves in the shop with elegant steps. No! No! It's like this! Beside them, the saint-level masters obviously had better imitation. What are you guys doing here? At this moment, Mr. Fang walked over. If you want to dance awkwardly, do it outside. He mumbled in displeasure, really, learning Farron's breakdance crew's dance moves, and dancing in my shop. With more acute hearing than others, Kelebel suddenly froze and paused her dance. Then, she looked at the elves who were spinning and leaping with sticks they had obtained from somewhere. "Can't you keep your mouth shut?" Calible's face twitched in fury. Different from other games, in Dark Souls, the players learned and used battle skills and sword techniques with corresponding weapons. They learned spells through special spell scrolls. With the talents of the main character, the players could use the corresponding sword technique after they got their hand on the Farron Greatsword. Although they were all nameless people, as main characters, they still had some talents such as the growth in combat techniques and the use of battle skills and spells mentioned above. These talents relieved some pressure from the players. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to clear the stage all their lives. Be they lord or legend, the curse shows no mercy. What a sham! Farron Undead Legion's swords and armor which contained their power before they died were placed on their throne. Seeing this scene, the crestfallen warrior who had told the main character how to traverse Farron Keep lamented self-mockingly. Yes, this was the destiny of the Lords of Cinder. It had to be mentioned that all through the game, each battle was a test to the limit for the players. After watching the live stream, the new players who were level 9 and the Saint level masters began to adjust their state and obtained quite a lot of inspiration. Also, some of their habits got influenced and changed during the process. For example, after watching that Nalan Hung Guyo killed Farron's Undead Legion with the Dark Sword, the embarrassing dog-headed man felt that the Dark Sword was indeed powerful and even changed the name of his live stream from Dark Souls 3 to Dark Sword 3. Now, he was on Dark Sword 3 Episode 10. Meanwhile, the elves were working hard in the game in order to get the Breakdance Greatsword. The Greatsword that contained the sword technique of Farron's Undead Legion was jokingly called the Breakdance Greatsword by Mr. Fang, but it had great abilities in the game. For example, when the players battled with the nightmarish Black Knight, they could dodge the opponent's attacks and counterattack easily with this sword technique and corresponding movements. Therefore, when you see someone dancing awkwardly in front of you, never underestimate your opponent. Otherwise, you have a very high probability of dying tragically. However, for the real masters, they could use any weapons they liked as long as they mastered them. When the players returned with the remains of Farron's Undead Legion and opened the catacombs of Karthus, which was a nation that had been devoured by the Abyss, they embarked on the journey to bring back the remains of the second Lord of Cinder. The entire second section of the game belonged to Pontiff Solivan. This might be the most powerful and most terrifying enemy whom the players will encounter so far. Solivan came from the painted world of Ariandel, which was a place covered in ice and a shelter for wandering and despairing people from the real world. That world was full of refugees who had nothing with them. These people got comfortable in conformity and became eroded by this comfortable lifestyle. It was why this ambitious young sorcerer didn't fit in this world. Therefore, this ambitious sorcerer left the painted world. He came to the ruins of the previously prosperous kingdom of giants. The only thing left was the burning profaned flame. The flame is profane since its eternal burning violates the natural laws. The flame contains the great power of abyss which can erode people's minds and trigger evil with its great power. Note, this should be a description found in the game, but I can't find it anywhere. As described by the words on the item, Solivan dug out the ruins of the profaned capital by accident. When Solivan left the profaned capital, he was no longer the young man who had just walked out of the painted world. His unfading ambition now blazed like the profaned flame. With a great sword engulfed in the profaned flame and the ambition stained by the abyss, he turned his eyes toward Irithyll. Deduced from some information and clues, Irithyll was probably the royal city of the ancient the Lord of Cinder Gwyn, Aenir Londo. Undoubtedly, there lived the descendants of Gwyn, including the Sun Princess Gwynevera and her Silver Knights, Dark Sun Gwyndolin and his Dark Moon Blades, and their sister Yorshka. In the ancient times, Gwyn's knights and the royal members lived on this land of kings, and it had been one of the most prosperous cities in the world. Silver Knights guarded the cathedral, and Smuff, one of the 4 knights of Gwyn, was also stationed here. However, this great city experienced a great change after Solivan arrived. No one had expected that this sorcerer who came from a distant place would erode the whole dynasty. The mysterious illness of Gwyndolin made him lose control over the blade of the Dark Moon Covenant, and the Way of White Priests couldn't escape Sullivan's control. Also, Archdeacon MacDonald discovered the deep spell, and it helped him release a weird magic from human dregs and erode the priests slowly. Gradually, Sullivan's true intentions began to be revealed. Irithyll was full of residents who had been turned into enslaved undead, and even worse, wild beasts. Some were even turned into spider-like creatures with skeleton bodies and barely recognizable human faces. Gwyndolin's Outrider Nights also ended tragically. For example, the Dancer of the Boreal Valley was a royal descendant of Irithyll, and so was Vord of the Boreal Valley, who accompanied the dancer all year round. Eventually, Smuff, one of Gwyn's 4 knights, and Gwyn's second son Gwyndolin, had also become food to be devoured. It was how Aldrich, Devourer of Gods, got its name. Stepping into the deep cathedral, the players could see the upper body of Gwyndolin propped up by mud-like lower body. These were the enemies that the players were going to face, Pontiff Sullivan and Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Undoubtedly, engaging in a battle with such enemies was like a myth and a legend in itself. As the game went on, the players went through countless hardships and deaths, travelled through the catacombs of Carthus, and came to Irithyll. Under the moonlight and looking at the cold city that had once been extremely prosperous and powerful, even the saint-level masters began breathing heavily without them knowing. In short, the former thought that the end would come sooner or later and would rather protect himself, and the latter intended to take the throne with his blazing ambition and conspiracies and finish the last gods, ending the era of fire by allowing darkness to devour the light. They were waiting for the first flame to die out and the darkness to fall. It was impossible to ask them to link the fire. Besides, they even encouraged more unkindled to join the Church of the Deep and kill the supporters of Fire Link. Gradually, Celebel had also fought her way to Irithyll. Sitting in a corner alone, she was happily dancing with the breakdance greatsword in her hand against a pontiff knight on the screen. After killing one with embarrassment, she drew another pontiff knight, enjoying herself very much. Dancing awkwardly. At this moment, a voice came from behind her. "Hey!" She scrambled to put away the breakdance greatsword and looked back. Seeing Mr. Fang standing behind her, she blushed and said, "What are you looking at? Go away. This person sure is nosy. I'm sitting in the corner, and he is still seeing me." Mr. Fang's face twitched. "I'm just passing by on my way to the bathroom. How can you blame me?" "Okay. Okay. Take your time with the practice." "What do you mean by take your time with the practice?" Celebel flushed in anger. She was the elf queen. How could I use such? She glanced back and saw that Mr. Fang was gone. She changed to other weapons but died several times. Then, after glancing around and seeing that no one was nearby, she secretly took out the breakdance greatsword again. By accident, she attracted the attention of several pontiff knights. With tears on her face, she continued to dance awkwardly among them, wishing that she would die fewer times before she could kill them. How come this mystical realm is so difficult? At this moment, First Elder Hyra was dozing before a big pile of files. So tired, when will Her Majesty return? Finally, Celebel stood before the church in fatigue. When she pushed open the gate of the church sitting on the highest spot in Irithyll, she regained some of her confidence. "I just don't believe I can't dance." With a dark expression, she immediately corrected herself. "Pooh! What awkward dance!" At this moment, a group of elves walked over and exclaimed, "Wow! This elf is also using the Farron greatsword. Awesome!" A few other elves also came over with stars in their eyes. "You came to this stage already? I just got my hands on the Farron greatsword." "How did you do it?" an elf asked in admiration. "I say, how come you guys run to every slightest disturbance?" Mr. Fang asked in disdain while passing by. "Why not?" Celebel bristled. What's wrong with my elves coming over to watch me play anyway? She said immediately, ignore him. I'm best with this Farron greatsword. I used the Farron greatsword to kill High Lord Wolnir. I'm sure that I can easily defeat this pontiff too. All the elves looked at her screen expectantly. Hurry up and beat him. Let's see how well you can dance awkwardly. How come there are so many people here? Lydon and Wilson also walked up, and so did Saint Willie, who had just started the game and was being tortured by Gundur. In the huge church, Pontiff Sullivan stood in the center of the hall silently. He had two big swords in his hands. One was blazing with profaned flame, and the other emitted dazzling dark moonlight. The two streaks of lights, one red and one purple, seemed to have lit up the dim hall. Pontiff Sullivan was tall and thin, and he was wearing a decayed sorcerer's robe and pontiff hat. Soon, Kel-Ebel took out Farron greatsword and began to rotate and leap around him. With an ear-piercing noise, the big sword engulfed in profaned flame torn open the darkness like a sharp arrow and instantly came before Kel-Ebel. With fast and agile movements, she suddenly bent her body and narrowly dodged the sword's strike. Then, she slashed out her sword horizontally and made Sullivan stumble. Oh! The audience behind her instantly yelled, "Awesome! Hee hee! Ha ha!" Feeling cheerful, she continued to slash and hack. Then, she felt smug, and her character even rolled her eyes at Mr. Fang. At this moment, black horrid flames rose from Sullivan's body while huge black wings spread out behind him like tree branches. A black shadow with the same shape as Sullivan leaped up into the air like a fallen angel. Ah! The elf who was dancing awkwardly screamed. She was instantly sent flying by the horrifying black flames. Then, the dark moon sword energy shot out from Sullivan's left hand like a laser beam. Boom! Boom! Next, the profaned great sword struck down like a meteorite. Radiant flames rose. Words appeared on the screen. You died. Kel-Ebel was at a loss for words. I was careless. Again. After getting up at bonfire, Kel-Ebel wasn't discouraged. How can I not kill it with the awkward dance? The breakdance greatsword was the #1 sword in the world. You died, again. You died, she was beaten witless. The audience behind her began to talk. Let's go, she is too noob, there's nothing interesting to watch now, ah. On the verge of tears, she threw the sword down and said, this sword is garbage. It is a shame that I've practiced the awkward dance every day in secret. Humph. At this moment, Mr. Fang stood out with great dignity and said, don't call the sword garbage when you can't use it properly, okay? No one can use this sword to defeat Pontiff. Kel-Ebel said with greater dignity. Humph. Breakdance greatsword. Although this sword had the nickname Breakdance Greatsword, different people could achieve different results with this sword. If it was used by Artorius, it would be a godly weapon. It was also a great weapon in the hands of Farron's undead legion. It was why Mr. Fang said, it's your fault that you made it into a breakdance greatsword. Don't blame other things. Isn't it just the same sword technique? Kel-Ebel said in anger, unwilling to accept what Fang Qi had said. If you can, show me how to use it without dancing awkwardly. Seeing Mr. Fang's hesitation, she was even angrier. You don't dare to show it? Then don't judge me. She had the urge to jump up and hit Mr. Fang. I know you're good, but with the same sword technique and the same sword, I don't believe that you can do anything special. Mr. Fang scratched his head and said, I just don't want to make you feel too bad. Bad. The elves stood behind and watched. Kel-Ebel stomped her foot in fury that none of the elves spoke for her. At this moment, Mr. Fang sat down before a computer in the corner. You must use the Farron greatsword. Kel-Ebel immediately added another condition. After all, she wasn't stupid, and she was worried that this shop owner might use some lowly tricks to pass the boss. Mr. Fang changed to the Farron greatsword. My goodness! Astonishing! The shop owner is playing the game. The elves immediately walked over. Kelebel almost exploded in fury. You guys ran off when I played. How come you are all running over to watch him play? With her hands on her waist, Kelebel stood behind Mr. Fang in a huff and glared at the game character who was wearing rags. Such ugly clothes, she commented. Obviously, Mr. Fang was dressed in the master's attire. Hey? The shop owner is playing. Some saint-level masters walked up too. He's going to use this sword. Can he do it? They saw that Mr. Fang had also come to the stage of Pontiff Sullivan. They felt better when they realized that they were not left behind. Some of them even smiled since they summoned an NPC to help them skip Sullivan. They felt proud now, not knowing that the more they skipped, the more torturous the later stages would be. The shop owner will dance awkwardly too. They talked among themselves in low voices. This elf tried it earlier, it's impossible, he will get a hard lesson. With her acute hearing, Kelebel heard the whispers and felt delighted. You dare to try it? I'll see how you will act once you can't pull it off. Mr. Fang spared little attention to the Farron greatsword. Instead, he weighed the small dagger in his other hand for a while as if he was trying to feel it out. Then, he walked into Pontiff Sullivan's chamber. The cathedral was very big, and Sullivan was in the very depths of it, at least 60 meters from the gate. The place was deadly silent. Pontiff Sullivan silently stood in the center of the hall like a skeleton. He seemed to be waiting for his enemies. When Pontiff Sullivan and Mr. Fang's character were only about 30 meters apart, flames lit up on the two big swords. In the blink of an eye, the firelight from the profaned greatsword shot across the 30 meters between them and toward Fang Qi like a lightning flash piercing through darkness. Everyone watched the strike without blinking. Usually, the players encountering Sullivan's sudden strike for the first time would be caught by surprise. They usually couldn't dodge and would panic. However, in her previous battles, Kelebel had dodged it with Farron greatsword. Right now, Mr. Fang had the Farron greatsword in his hand, which meant that he should be able to. He isn't moving. The audience suddenly saw Fang Qi staying where he was without moving a muscle. In fact, he was directly walking toward Sullivan one step at a time. Is it possible that this guy doesn't even know how to dance awkwardly? Kelebel mumbled to herself. The moment she said that, Fang Qi lifted his left hand that was holding the dagger instead of the Farron greatsword in his right hand. Ding! The huge sword collided with the dagger, and a series of metal colliding noises sounded while sparks flew in all directions. Is he crazy? The audience all exclaimed. Even a moron knew what would happen when a dagger was used to block a huge sword. However, the viewers suddenly saw the profaned greatsword in Sullivan's hand moving to one side. Then, it was viciously bounced off. This is... Kelebel suddenly remembered that the same thing had happened to her when she dealt with the sword master. She had felt as if all her force was bounced back into her body, and she couldn't muster any strength, as if her whole body was instantly crushed. This is it. She stared at the screen with widened eyes. Sure enough, in the next moment, Kelebel discovered that Sullivan was in the same state as she had once been. For an instant, Sullivan couldn't move. Fang Qi lifted his Farron greatsword and hacked down with vicious force. Crack! This strike left a horrifying wound in Sullivan's body. Sullivan became cautious and didn't strike out casually. On the other hand, Fang Qi casually walked in the cathedral while he confronted his opponent. Like a ghost, Sullivan moved around Fang Qi, trying to find a chance to strike. Like a lightning flash, his sword thrust out from an impossible angle from the side. Ah! This strike caught everyone by surprise. Before they could react, the strike was parried. The Farron greatsword hacked down again and almost cut off Sullivan's head from his extremely hard body. Everyone stared at the screen in a daze. Is it the Farron greatsword that you're using? Black blazing flames shot out like the water out of a fountain. As if he had been anticipating this, Fang Qi moved back and dodged it. A dark shadow that looked like a dark angel split from Sullivan's body, and the two profaned great swords burned with blazing flames around them as if they would burn up everything in the world. Flames shot into the ground, and the surging flames forced Fang Qi to retreat a few steps. At this moment, Mr. Fang explained on the side, "You asked me how to defeat Sullivan. Use parry. Who said that you can't use parry with the breakdance greatsword? Who's the first person that taught you how to parry? Do you know Hawkwood, the crestfallen warrior sitting beside the thrones of Lords of Cinder?" Mr. Fang said, "That deserter escaped from the Farron's breakdance crew. How can you say that you know how to use the breakdance sword if you can't parry?" In the next instant, the Pontiff and the Phantom struck down with their profaned great swords at the same time. Mr. Fang slightly shifted to one side and dodged the Black Shadow's huge sword, which fell like a waterfall of flames. Then, he parried Sullivan's sword with the other hand. Another heavy sword strike was used. "So, when you get a lesson from Sullivan, give him a lesson back with parry," Fang Qi said. Everyone behind him fell silent. The close-range combat system in Dark Souls was similar to that in Devil May Cry. There weren't many ranged techniques, but if the players combined the concentrated strength, speed, and skills, the attacks would be horrifying. Even gods, whose tremendous godly power enabled them to use lethal ranged skills, could be blocked. Humans who had weaker strength thought of a way to deal with these moves. Parry was a special skill like the release in Devil May Cry. The difference was that no humans could possibly master release, but the parry could be used by humans in real life. There was parry and spell parry, and the system had perfectly recreated them. Parry was the skill that the sword master used on Kel-Ebel. It could instantly block the attack and use the recoil force to shock the opponent's body, instantly immobilizing the attacker by afflicting violent shock to the body and the internal organs. With special shields, the players could also parry spells and ranged attacks, but the effects were not as good. Of course, parry could only be used when very strict conditions were met. The series of movements must be finished in the instant when the weapons collided. Otherwise, the defender would most likely get hurt. Perhaps, before being buried, the main character wasn't weak. The main character in the game could parry with shields that were fitting for parry and could even parry with his arm, which showed that he was proficient with parrying. The players only needed to find the perfect moment to use it. This skill greatly decreased the difficulty level of this battle. However, defeating Sullivan this way. "Do you think I'm a god?" Kel-Ebel screamed silently in her mind. Even Kel-Ebel and the other saint-level masters were feeling desperate. Meanwhile in the old shop, Su Tianji and other idle players also wondered how they could manage this kind of gameplay. They had little success with release when they played Devil May Cry 3. Now, they were controlling a character whose strength, speed, and reflexes were inferior to that of Dante, but they were required to use the same level of skills as Dante. While they complained about the difficulty of the game, Mr. Fang had the feeling that some of them were gradually turning into muggles. In this fish pool that Mr. Fang was managing, apart from a few exceptions, most of the fish were idle ones. Mr. Fang felt very sad and frustrated about this situation. Perhaps for Mr. Fang, this stuff wasn't too difficult to learn since he had access to the game Cultivation room and was very familiar with these games. But for the people in this world, they spent most of their time on the growth of strength, and the improvement of skills was just a byproduct on the side. This was the tradition that had been passed down from the ancient times. After all, if I can knock you down with a brick, why should I spend time on practicing fancy moves? But for Mr. Fang, he felt bad that the players had a totally different experience and results in the game from his. Would they claim that I had tricked my customers, right? They would claim that the results that I obtained in the games are just special effects that I secretly put in the game, right? At this moment, "Sir, can you explain it to me?" The moment that Mr. Fang put down the virtual reality headset, he saw Kel-Ebel's frustrated face. Kel-Ebel had avidly watched as Mr. Fang parried in the game and was eager to learn. But it wasn't something that she could learn by watching. Although she was a top-tier master in this world, the shop owner was indeed stronger than her even though he appeared to be younger than her. Therefore, she felt that she wasn't lowering herself to ask for help, it was more like being humble. After thinking that through, she didn't feel ashamed to ask for help. A light of eagerness for knowledge flashed in her eyes. At this moment, on the screen of the livestream room, Su Tianji gifted Mr. Fang 6,666 goose eggs. Nalan Mingxiu gifted Mr. Fang 1 rocket. Saint Wilson gifted Mr. Fang 5 rockets. Luo Piaoling gifted Mr. Fang, "Sir, can you explain it?" The players who had tried release in Devil May Cry knew how hard this skill was. They couldn't learn release since they were humans, but they felt like they might be able to learn this one. This, Mr. Fang looked at the expectant eyes and felt. It doesn't seem proper for me not to teach them. At this moment, he heard a beep from the system which issued another task. New task, Challengers Tutorial School, Elementary, Task Description, Live Tutorial for the new game task target, help the Muggle students reach the average, advanced level. Help the excellent students reach master level task reward, League of Legends. Meanwhile, on the other side of a distant continent pure white grand palaces dotted the sides of the mountains, and auspicious beasts flew in the clouds while the ethereal tunes resonated in the sky. On the tall mountain gate were written 2 big words Heavenly Faction. In the depths of the clouds behind the square near the mountain gate, 2 Daoists were sitting in a remote and quiet spot, discussing Dao. A white-haired, middle-aged man said mildly, "The ancestral master left the true words that Daoists have a limit, but Dao is limitless. The Dao pursued by cultivators has a limit, so we will never reach the perfect realm above the mortal world like the true gods. However, Dao itself is limitless. Immortals are people who understand the laws of the world. If so, you and I can all be called immortals. Instead of pursuing the Dao that has a limit, we will be better off drinking nectar, taking a deep sleep in the ethereal mountain, and merging myself with the endless great Dao. Don't you think so?" In short, he meant that even if humans could rise above the mortal realm, there was a limit for it. Obviously, this was an unambitious interpretation. The other was a black-haired man with a wide forehead and a square face, and he was dressed in black clothes. He sat there with a sword on his back, and he said, "The ancestral master's words mean that we cultivators can break through the limit of Dao one day and reach the endless great Dao. Senior brother, I think your understanding is not right." This interpretation was more active and ambitious. At this moment the white-haired middle-aged man seemed to sense something, and a jade slab flew out from his sleeve and revealed an image. The array is finally done. Near the Yuanyang city shop, 2 cultivators dressed in messengers' robes immediately said, "Greetings, 2 elders. How was it?" The white-haired middle-aged man asked mildly, "Have you found the descendants from our faction in your journey to the continent of immortal relics?" "Yes." But what?" The 2 elders frowned. The 2 messengers, one fat and one thin, took out a communication jade which showed the clips of the Legend of Sword and Fairy, Dungeon Fighter Online, and etc. "What are these?" The 2 elders stared at the images that were showing how people took the control of their own destiny from heaven and the fierce battle against almighty demon Lord Chonglu. "These are cultivation mystical realms," the thin messenger said cautiously. "The people in the West Continent are using them now, but we don't have them yet. We heard that we can now ask the shop owner and apply to open an internet cafe branch shop in our continent of the Immortal Village. We are now asking for your approval, elders." "Hey!" The 2 elders exchanged a look. Then, the 2 messengers began to talk about the things they had seen on the West Continent. "We'll summon the other elders to talk about it." The 2 elders looked solemn. At this moment, Mr. Fang was tutoring his students. "You asked me how to use parry and if there's a method to practice it. The answer is yes." At this moment, most players in the Yuanyang City Shop, Half City Shop, Zhihua City Shop, and the new shop in Kanglan City were watching instructor Fang's live stream. But the regular method is definitely useless. Mr. Fang demonstrated while he explained, since the opponents are stronger and faster than us, we can't deal with their attacks by relying only on reflexes. On the screen, Mr. Fang demonstrated how he tried to parry after the opponent attacked. Soon, his arm was pierced. We need to predict their attacks, Mr. Fang said, there are all kinds of weapons here. We can analyze each attack of each weapon frame by frame. Sometimes, we can even divide one frame into smaller parts. Mr. Fang saved the video of Sullivan's attacks and slowed down the moves, dividing each frame into smaller parts. Then, the movements looked much clearer. With the frames divided properly, we can begin to learn. At the beginning, you must memorize them, then you're good. Mr. Fang drank some water and said, after you memorize them, you would have made the first step in learning. After that, we will be learning how to use the skills creatively according to the situation you're in. Everyone froze. They almost completely turned into stones. Chapter 772 The Supreme Lord of the Origins. Obviously, parrying was used in melee combat. Then, how should sorcerers fight? With the sorceries getting so powerful in the later stages, do you still need to ask? After resetting his properties, Mr. Fang came before Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. He took out a strange bell from his pocket. Suddenly, golden lightning bolts gathered in his hands and lit up the whole cathedral with bright lights. The lightning spear, as pure and holy as sunshine, looked like godly fury. In the instant that the monster, whose upper body was a god and lower body was a pile of mud, began to cast a spell, the lightning spear's light pierced the darkness of the gloomy hall. Boom! 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 Everyone saw nothing but dazzling golden light. They saw that the monster was almost dead when it turned into mud and shrank back into the deep ground. Although the players needed to rely on skills in many places in the game, there were still many powerful spells. For example, the Miracle, Sunlight Spear, was one of the best spells of Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, the ruler of the whole god race. The golden lightning came from the great power that he had gained from the first flame. Obviously, Mr. Fang hadn't killed the boss, so he did it again. This time, he threw out several huge fire clouds, looking like flame-raised nans. Everyone saw that the horrifying monster almost died again. The bed of chaos contained the chaotic fire that had once given birth to demons and was one of the most powerful pyromancy. In Dark Souls, the demons came from the combination of the first flame and chaotic flame instead of the abyss. I won't talk more about sorcerers, Mr. Fang said, you guys have already begun the study on crystal magic. Crystal magic originated from ancient dragons. In the world of Dark Souls, Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, established a new civilization after overthrowing the rule of ancient dragons. The ancient dragons were immortals, and their immortal power came from their dragon scales. The crystal magic was born from studying the power of dragon scales. Dark Souls had a huge setting which was very different from other games. These players had just begun understanding things from the perspective of the main character. They needed to study the world hard each day if they wanted to know more about it. Of course, this didn't affect their gameplay. For the average players who didn't plan to venture deeper into the world, they only needed to know that they must drag the Lords of Cinder back to link the fire. The players watched the live stream attentively and made notes diligently. At this moment, Mr. Fang suddenly received a message on his communication jade. He glanced at it and saw that it came from Yuanyang City shop. Li Wuya was now managing Yuanyang City shop. Since he was an elder of Li family, Mr. Fang was quite happy to leave things to his hands since everything was well managed. Li Wuya only contacted him to talk about important things. Mr. Fang glanced at the message. A branch shop in the continent of the Immortal Village. Today's tutorial ends here. Obviously, Mr. Fang decided to end the live stream for today. That's all for today's tutorial. Sala stared at the live stream room, looking unsatisfied. Did anyone record it? Merlin suddenly exclaimed. He had been too engrossed in the live stream and just thought of this. I did. I did. Sala raised her hand excitedly. At this moment, she congratulated herself for her forethought and intelligence. Then, she led others to review Instructor Fang's lesson today. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang had his communication jade in his hands. Li Wei said, "Boss, 2 cultivators who claim to come from Heavenly Faction of the continent of Immortal Village applied to open a branch shop in that area. Senior Gu has checked their identities and said that they are indeed related to the great figure who had visited this continent and left behind the cultivation system in Heavenly Academy." Of course, Mr. Fang knew about Heavenly Academy, which was the school that Xiaoyu and Li Lanruo went to each day. He was very familiar with Gu Tingyun as well. Do they have such a history? Mr. Fang had been considering the issue of opening more branch shops, but since they would consume lots of resources, he was very cautious with the choice of locations. After all, Mr. Fang now had the privilege to establish branch shops. Continent of the Immortal Village. It's the East Continent where you're from. Li Wei explained. This should be fine. Since now that the West Continent had a shop, there was no reason that he wouldn't open a shop in the East Continent. Then, Li Wei continued, I told them about the situation here. To avoid unnecessary trouble, they have come up with a good plan and intend to do a full-scale promotion. Promotion, do we need that? Mr. Fang replied. It's just a simple introduction. Li Wei said as his face froze. We must do some introduction. Otherwise, the cultivators over there wouldn't understand our business. You're right. Mr. Fang said, I'll go over to Yuanyang City shop. The continent of the Immortal Village had 3 immortal factions, 4 ancient sects, and 6 blessed cave abodes. As one of the 3 immortal factions, the Heavenly Faction was absolutely a big organization. At this moment, in the middle of the Great Hall of Heavenly Faction, there sat a dignified-looking middle-aged cultivator who was wearing a reddish-brown daoist robe and a black hairpiece. On both sides of him sat several sedate, ethereal-looking elders. The expressions on their faces had never looked so solemn before. It was silent in the Great Hall. Who would like to go? At this moment, the faction master spoke. I would. A sedate man who was about 30 years old walked out and stood in the center of the hall. His clothes showed that his rank wasn't low. This issue is very important. The faction master sitting in the center of the great hall stared at the young cultivator with a solemn expression and said, Gu Song, this is an unprecedented important task. Since you offer to take it, you must do your best. Are you ready to meet that legendary existence? Gulp, the cultivator swallowed with difficulty, looking as if he was granted the most important mission in the world. The faction master waved his big sleeve, and a figure appeared. This figure stood with his arms crossed while countless sunlight beams shot down and shattered the faction underneath him. The Master of Origins looks to be merely an ancestral warrior but can easily destroy a whole faction. He even defeated the Shadow Legion, which almost destroyed the whole West Continent, and he united the continent all by himself. I suspect that he is like those ultimate existences who had gone beyond the Dao. At least, he is a supreme existence. Supreme. Everyone in the Great Hall turned grimmer. The cultivator named Gusong panted slightly while he said, that's the most powerful figure in the whole continent of Immortal Village. It was an existence on the same level as the Grand Elder. Bring back the information about this Supreme Master and Origins, so we can promote Origins Branch Palace before it opens on our continent. It will stun the hooligans and save us unnecessary trouble in the future. The faction master patted Gusong on the shoulder. Are you confident? I'm forever grateful to the faction for my training. I'll finish the mission at all costs. At this moment, Mr. Fang stuck his hand into Zhang Xiaoyu's potato chip bag. Hey? Empty. Hey, Aloli yelled, I only ate a few. Fang's personal interview. One of them wore a green robe and a white hairpiece, and the other was elegantly dressed in a white robe. With radiant glints in their eyes, they obviously were not average people. They looked delighted. We didn't expect that things would go so smoothly. You did it. Congratulations. The two disciples congratulated. However, Gu Song's expression changed at this moment. But, things are not so simple. Ugh, the disciples froze. While walking away from the great hall, Gu Song looked grim while a drop of cold sweat slid from his face. This might be a reincarnated existence who is above the mortal world. At least he's an existence as powerful as the Grand Elder. It's said that he's so merciless that he could destroy a top-tier faction on the continent without blinking an eye. The moment he said it, the other two disciples immediately retreated several steps. Although the journey to Origins is very dangerous, it's the faction's test for us, Gu Song said solemnly. You're my best disciples. We must succeed or die. We must succeed or die. Then, Gu Song glanced at them. Go and get ready. Be prepared for anything. Yes. A breeze brushed the leaves in the forest while moonlight caressed the gurgling creek. On the green mountaintop under the soft moonlight, the white-robed young man said gravely, Junior brother, if I can't make it back, please take care of junior sister Yun Miao for me. A green-robed young man lifted his cup and drank alone. With a bright moon overhead and a gentle breeze in the mountain, we will meet again in our next life. Meanwhile in his family's ancestral shrine, Gu Song looked grim. I entrust the whole family to you guys. The three of them braced themselves for everything. On the next day, they set off. In the Yuanyang city shop it was early in the morning. As usual, Mr. Fang put a sausage in a bowl of instant noodles and took a box of spicy sticks before sitting down on a couch. While slurping over the instant noodles, he looked up at the three people solemnly sitting before him. Hey? You came so soon. Just like the legends said, he appears to be lower than level 8. With great caution, Gu Song looked at the young man before him and thought, he eats noodles just like anyone on the roadside. But, if anyone takes him as an average person, it would be a disaster for them. My shop usually doesn't do promotions, Mr. Fang said as he ate his instant noodles. At this moment, more people came over and sat down on the couches with instant noodles. This aroma. Is it a test? It's said that some eccentric seniors like to make strange tests. If we can't resist it. The three people's faces instantly fell. Then, the two disciples looked at Gu Song. Deacon Gu Song, we can't be so passive. His face fell. We must be more active. In the entire continent of immortal relics, Senior Fang, you're the most powerful cultivator, Gu Song said, we came to visit you with the hope that we can bring back a simple condensed visual spiritual spell, so we can introduce your deeds to the major factions. Of course, the deeds should not be about battles. Otherwise, Gu Song added in a hurry, just the things in your daily life. I think this will become the new legend in the continent of Immortal Village. A new legend, Mr. Fang stuffed a spicy stick into his mouth and considered while chewing on it. Then, his eyes lit up, and he said while standing up, good idea. At this moment, the live stream room was opened. The shop owner is doing a tutorial again. Instantly, people from different shops all came to watch. Gu Song signaled to the green-robed young man with his eyes. The disciple immediately took out a spiritual artifact which looked like a bronze mirror and aimed it at Mr. Fang's live stream room. A bright light fell, shining on Mr. Fang and his live stream room. Mr. Fang drank up the noodle soup and dumped the empty bowl into the garbage can. Burp. Let's do it. Gu Song's heart lurched at the sound of the burp. They exchanged a weird look with each other. How come it doesn't feel right? I'll do some warm-up first. It has been a long while since I played the King of Fighter last time with Xiaoyu. Mr. Fang put the King of Fighter on the live stream first. Then, the viewers saw a loli sitting beside him. Before playing games, practicing in the King of Fighter helps you optimize your state, Mr. Fang said. It is a good challenge for your reflexes. Sir. Choose your characters. Beside him, Zhang Xiaoyu became impatient and wanted to begin. 3, 2, 1, begin. On the screen in Xone, Zhang Xiaoyu shook the joystick wildly. Heya! Benimaru, who was randomly chosen by Mr. Fang, dropped to the ground. Wahaha! I'm awesome! Xiaoyu! Awesome! 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 Mr. Fang is trash. I can only say that your techniques have improved. Mr. Fang was calm. It's no problem. The next character is Iori Yagami that I chose randomly. He will be great. Watch my plays. Kyuzukaze. I got you. Heavy punch. On the screen, Mr. Fang's Iori Yagami caught Zhang Xiaoyu and beat her viciously. The green-clothed young man holding the bronze mirror-like spiritual treasure looked horrified and turned his eyes toward Gusong beseechingly. I'll do it, Gusong said immediately. Can I ask the why you wanted to build this Origins Grand Palace in the first place, Senior Fang? Oh, Mr. Fang said while continuing to play the King of Fighters, I wasn't qualified to go to an academy, so I had to do this business. Did you want to do this to surprise them? So that you can say to the academy which refused to take you in, don't underestimate others. Maybe. In fact, I didn't put much thought in it, Mr. Fang said while playing the King of Fighters. Sometimes, I'm happy, and the customers are happy, so I continue to operate the business. Of course, if I didn't choose to do this, I would have done something else. This little girl is close to you, Gusong froze for a moment and then said. Mr. Fang said, oh. I picked her up from the roadside when I saw her standing there all by herself. I pitied her and brought her back. I came because you have buns. Zhang Xiaoyu said with a snort. You ate so much that no one dared to take you in. Mr. Fang slapped one palm on his forehead and played with the other hand. Gusong exchanged a look with his disciples. Master, how come I feel like something is wrong? Then. How about your deist mates? Gusong asked again. A super master like you must have many female soulmates, or 3,000 concubines. Instantly, the whole live stream room and the whole internet cafe turned silent. Everyone looked over. Indeed. Is this Senior Fang's true form? Oh, that. Mr. Fang stopped playing the King of Fighters and said after a moment of consideration, in fact, in the past. Forget it. I might have them in the future. Everyone in the audience froze for a second. Hey! That's it. Gusong's whole face twisted while frustration hit him hard. He thought, what kind of an answer is this? Do you mean? You don't have any? Finished. I'm finished. I'm hitting a raw nerve. Gusong's heart beat faster and faster, feeling as if it would explode at any minute. But in the next moment. No. He looked toward Fang Qi abruptly and thought, why isn't he make a move? Isn't he supposed to use Divine Light? 36th Tiangang Sword Array. Release. Come on. Use one. Gusong seemed to be waiting for death. But still, nothing happened. What are you doing? Fang Qi looked at him curiously. Woo. Mr. Fang looked back and saw the cultivator from the continent of the immortal village turn pale while blood trickled from the corners of his mouth. Master. The two disciples hurried over and supported Gusong with shaky hands so that the latter didn't fall onto the ground. F***ck. Mr. Fang stood up from his seat immediately. My goodness! Zhang Xiaoyu exclaimed. Someone spewed blood. Everyone in the internet cafe scrambled to help. Mr. Fang yelled immediately, Elder Wuya. Bring some healing pills. Hurry. The two disciples watched the scene dumbfoundedly. Shakily, the green-robed young man said in a low voice, Did we visit the wrong person? What are you waiting for? Mr. Fang glared at them. Oh, the white-robed disciple hurried over to help, and Gu Song began to recover. Gu Song's face fell. Can such a recording stun others and establish dominance? We need the legend from the continent of immortal relics. Is it because he's in his homeland, so he is merciful to us? Gu Song continued to think. Senior, can we go to the West Continent? Gu Song suggested. The West Continent? Mr. Fang thought about it. Hey, Li Wei said to Gu Song in a low voice, don't inconvenience the shop owner too much, sir. At this moment, Zhang Xiaoyu pulled Mr. Fang's sleeve. Take me to the West Continent, I want to play with Sister Sala and others. Don't you have school? Mr. Fang said solemnly. He. At this moment, Gu Tingyu leaned over and said, our academy is in the summer break. Pu. How come you cultivators have summer break as well? With a dark expression, Mr. Fang said to Zhang Xiaoyu, you can't play for too long, okay, in the Kanglan City shop at the West Continent aren't they supposed to stand up and greet him with warmth? Gu Song looked around at the customers who showed no response when Mr. Fang walked into the shop. Then, he gave a signal to his two disciples with his eyes. We'll do some secret investigation and get to the bottom of it. Gu Song and Mr. Fang walked on the streets in Kanglan City. Meanwhile, the green-robed disciple named Kang Feng returned to the shop. At this moment, he saw some elves sitting together and enjoying their afternoon tea. Kang Feng walked over brazenly. You are asking me what Mr. Feng's best it? The greatest it? Rowling looked baffled. Yet, Kang Feng said in a hurry, isn't Senior Feng a super master? He's best at playing games. Dark Souls. Instructor Feng taught us a lot of gaming knowledge. And many battle pithy formulas for fighting all kinds of nameless monsters. Rowling said. Battle, pithy formulas. Glints flashed in Kang Feng's eyes. It's because of Senior Feng's guidance with your training in the mystical realms that you could defeat the Shadow Legion, right? Right. Can you tell me about it? Immediately, Rowling recited with great familiarity, hairy bosses are afraid of fire, and big bosses are afraid of doors, can I watch you guys train in the mystical realm? Kang Feng asked. Okay. Rowling was hacked and tortured by Farron's undead legion. Elder Sewell was hacked and tortured by the Pontiff. Kel Ebel was knocked down on the ground and beaten witless by Aldrich. They were being tortured mercilessly. Kang Feng watched the elves dumbfoundedly. Meanwhile, in a restaurant in Kanglan City, Xiaoyu. Try this. And try this too. Sala forked a snack into Zhang Xiaoyu's bowl. This is delicious too. Mr. Fang sat at another desk while resting his chin on his palm. Gu Song stared at the person before him and then glanced at the warm and cheerful scene beside them. Could it be that I was mistaken? But, Gu Song asked cautiously, is it true that you defeated the Shadow Legion and destroyed the Nangong family with a sword? Oh, that. Of course, it's true. Gu Song looked Mr. Fang up and down in disbelief. The one-day visit finally ended. Did you get any good visuals? Gu Song asked. The two disciples were at a loss for words. They activated the bronze mirror-like spiritual artifact. They saw some elves chattered cheerfully, he's great at playing games. Battle pithy formula, hairy bosses are afraid of fire, and big bosses are afraid of doors, what should we do? Kang Feng looked at his master in unease. At this moment, Gu Song's communication jade lit up. The faction chief's voice came from it, how is your visit with Holiness Fang? We'll soon discuss the location of the Origins Branch Palace. It all depends on you how we'll begin this legend. This is one of the rarest and most significant issues in our heavenly faction in the last couple hundreds of years. Gu Song shivered instantly and replied, luckily, we finished our mission. Looking crazy as if he had been forced into a corner, he whispered to his two disciples, "Visual transformation." Visual transformation was an advanced spiritual spell which could change the shapes and visuals recorded in the condensed visual spiritual spell. Hearing this, the two disciples looked alarmed. "Then, we have to, just do it." "Yes. Yes." On the next day, sitting on a couch, Mr. Fang murmured to himself while eating instant noodles, "The heavenly faction said that they will show a simple introduction about me. It seems to begin today." Then, he took the mirror-like spiritual artifact and fiddled with it. "Does it work this way?" Swoosh! Visual appeared in the center of the bronze mirror. A group of elves walked up to watch it. The Supreme Master in the continent of immortal relics and his origins immortal palace. The eye-catching title seemed to shoot out of the projection. Gradually, new visuals appeared on the mirror. In the visual, Mr. Fang and his three visitors pushed open the door and entered the shop in deafening cheers. He casually waved at the visitors from all around the world, and the others only dared to sit down when he motioned them to sit down. "He is now sitting before me and enjoying the immortal meal, which was made with top-grade immortal rice and meat of rare beast and prepared with countless processes, instant noodles and sausage." Sitting across from the three visiting cultivators, Mr. Fang opened the lid of his bowl of instant noodles, and a dazzling golden immortal light shot into the sky. With one glance, he made me feel the chill from hell. In the visual, Mr. Fang, who was eating instant noodles on the couch before Gusong, almost looked like a demonic god with horns on his head. His chilly eyes emitted death presence. On the other side, this introduction drew huge responses in the East continent. "This is the ultimate master in the continent of immortal relic. Origins Immortal Palace will write another glorious chapter in the continent of the Immortal Village." The heavenly faction master watched the end of the visuals with glints in his eyes. Then, he stood up and looked at Gusong and his two disciples, who still had dark circles under their eyes. "It's only a few minutes long, but successfully created the image of a legendary master." The heavenly faction master patted Gusong on the shoulder and said, "Well done. In the future, if any troublemakers want to cause a scene in Origins, they should consider the consequences of messing with this horrifying Supreme Master from the continent of immortal relics." "Yes," Gusong's face twitched, and he almost spat out white foam. "If there's nothing here for us, Faction Master, we'll go back to take some rest. This Palace Master is indeed an idle guy. We're damn tired." In the new shop in Kanglan City, with great dignity, Mr. Fang explained to the elves who were watching from behind, "When they asked me to help make this video, I declined. Then, Duan." At this moment, Mr. Fang received two new tasks. New task: era of everyone participating in esports. Task target: the popularity of competitive games reaches 1 million. Task privilege: all rights related to esports competitions. The rewards will be determined based on the scale and popularity of the competition's. Task reward: 10-day access to the Cultivation Room, Big Esports Gift Box **. The number will be determined based on the degree of completeness and the rating for the task. New task: opening a new shop. Task description: open a branch shop in the continent of the Immortal Village, East Continent. Choose the location and purchase a shop. The shop can be managed by employees or the host. Task reward: TV series Wind and Cloud 3 and system remake of the Turbulent Homeland 1-3. 4 episodes will be released every Monday and Tuesday. TL note: the Turbulent Homeland is a glove puppetry show from Taiwan. It is made by Pili International Multimedia. The TV series debuted in 1985, and it still continues today. Since Mr. Fang had to go out on a business trip, he wouldn't be able to give online tutorials to the idle students. Of course, when Instructor Fang was away, there were other instructors with them, such as Instructor Gunder for newbies and the hot and spicy Instructor Pontiff Sullivan, etc. With these strict instructors and tight schedules of professional courses, the idle students wouldn't feel lonely when Mr. Fang was away. Every day, the players were so moved by Instructor Fang's gift that they cried while learning from these instructors. Perhaps this was the best gift that they received on the Children's Day. Humans can never escape from it. The world is like a tightly sealed wall, and we live in Dao. Therefore, we must follow the Dao of the world. At the foot of the main peak in Heavenly Faction, there was a forbidden zone guarded heavily by layers of arrays. This was the place where the Grand Elder, the Supreme Master of Heavenly Faction, cultivated in seclusion. In the deep and quiet cave abode, the Grand Elder was reading an ancient golden scroll carefully. The content in the golden scroll was obviously written in the ancient language, but he could translate some parts of it. However, there's an exception to everything. Near the half-city shop, the Yellow Spring Sea in the ultimate east suddenly boiled up. The weird Yellow Spring Sea had always been deadly silent. It had never looked like this before. In the cultivation realm, among those who entered, only a few cultivators were still exploring it. They entered a zone with many extremely strange palaces, and they explored around separately. Suddenly, they looked so horrified as if they had seen something unbelievable. At this moment, in a nameless space in the West Continent. It was the space where World Mage Hematon had once visited. Swine slowly opened his eyes, and it seemed like lightning bolts and storms from the endless void were flashing in them. The ancient continent split apart, many people fought for hundreds, thousands, or maybe even countless years, just for this opportunity akin to a carp leaping over the Dragon Gate. But now, I sense its existence. The top of God's Peak in the Radiant Light Godly Nation was rumored to be the place closest to the gods. It was the place where Saint Heinz cultivated in seclusion. At this moment, Saint Heinz slowly opened his eyes. Dolan. I'm here, Saint Heinz. A vague projected figure appeared before him, and Saint Dolan bowed to him. Did anything big happen while I was absent? As if he had received word from the gods, Saint Heinz looked calm and confident, indifferent to everything happening in the world. He asked mildly, the incident with Luther is now in the past, I think the other nations have forgotten about it. How about the spread of our faith? Have you made new progress in other nations? Saint Dolan's old face turned stiff. What are you stammering about? Saint Heinz said in displeasure, do you want to surprise me with good news? Speak now. My lord, Saint Dolan's old face almost twisted like a chrysanthemum as he said, almost all the branches of our judgment godly palace in other nations have been removed. Except for our radiant light godly nation, almost no one is worshipping the god of radiant light judgment. What? Saint Heinz's majestic face fell like a landslide as he yelled, what did you say? Say it, again. It's not necessary. At this moment, Princess Isabella's voice came from the secret chamber, as Mr. Dolan said, our radiant light godly nation is no longer what it was before. Saint Heinz's face turned from twisted to distorted to calm. Finally, he inhaled deeply and said, I already heard the words from our God. This time, we might have more important work to do than spreading our faith. More important than spreading our religion. Dolan asked curiously, what is so important? In the ancient times, the land collapsed, and countless masters fell. Do you know why? Saint Heinz said. Why? Because of an opportunity to become gods. Saint Heinz said as he stood up with his hands clasped behind his back, and unreadable glints flashing in his eyes.